All right. So we're going to get started with this webinar. This is, in my opinion, a really important webinar for interviews. I think if you understand what I'm going to talk about today, it could definitely change the direction of your career. I know of several people that I've coached and interviews that many have been on like 10 interviews and no job. Others have been on 20 and no job. Some people came to me unemployed and had no job after a period of time. So this is not just for people that aren't able to get jobs. This is a way to completely distinguish yourself in interviews more so than anybody else and get jobs where you never thought you would. This can get you jobs in firms that are not as more prestigious than you're at. It can get you jobs and this is really what I'm going to teach you is how people get jobs at even better firms than they believe they're capable of. And let me just grab something here. I'm sorry. Okay, so this can help you get positions at firms that are even more prestigious than you're at. It can help you get positions at pretty much any place you interview. So whether or not you're interviewing with a law firm or in-house or the government, this is, in my opinion, could be one of the more important lessons that you ever learn about how to get jobs. And not only does this talk to you about how to get jobs, but it talks about what you need to do to stay employed, the things that the most successful attorneys do that others don't, things that you can do to get clients. So these reasons are really fundamental to everything that you may want to do, that you're trying to achieve when you're trying to get a job. So I really like this webinar. This is the first time I presented it. And again, it's changed so many careers once you realize the stuff I'm going to talk about, and it can really just make a huge difference in all around. And I apologize for just talking so much about how important this is, but these reasons are extremely important. So this is a live webinar. What I encourage people to do is during the webinar, if you have questions or there's things that you think of that I'm talking about that you want me to talk about after the webinar, you can type them into the Q&A and I'll answer them. Also, after the webinar, I'll take questions and I'll answer as many questions as everyone has. And then in addition to that, I will, the questions you ask, so I guess what I was going to say, the questions you ask do not have to do they don't have to do with what we're talking about. Today, I'll answer about any questions you have related to your career, which I think for a lot of people is very helpful because many times you may be making mistakes on different things and not know why. But this webinar today is really about that. So one of the things that's important to understand, this is very important, and it's something you should always remember. If someone invites you into an interview, they've already seen your experience on your resume. They know pretty much that you can do the position based on what you've written on your resume. And it's not like you're coming in and they're asking you to explain your resume. They already know what it is. The other thing that's important, and they may ask questions about it just to make conversation, but pretty much they know that. And then another thing I just want to bring to everyone's attention, when someone brings you an interview, they actually really want to hire you because they're taking time to talk to you. They think your resume looks good. So it's most often the things you say in the interview and how you portray yourself in that interview. And these 5 questions are really going to get into that. And when people reject you after an interview, they'll usually say things like your experience is not right, or we found they'll give you reasons like that don't really say much. And rarely most of the time what happens when you don't get a job after an interview is you're being disqualified by the things I'm going to talk about today. And that's really what's happened. Law firms will ghost you. They won't talk. They'll give you weird reasons. But these are almost always these 5 things are really the reasons that you don't get jobs. And so this is what I'm going to talk about right now. And again, I would take notes if you have them. I would write this stuff down. I would think about the ways that you may have done this improperly in the past. So the first one that is extremely important is, will this attorney support me and have my back? That's really the question that people are asking. They want to make sure that you will basically support them, meaning you're going to protect them. You're going to do what they want you to do, and then you're not a threat to them, basically. And both associates that you're interviewing are asking that. So the associates are asking, does this person look like they'll make me look good, or are they a threat? And partners are also asking that as well. One of the things that's important to understand about law firms and attorneys is that when you're an attorney, all these people are constantly coming at you. The courts are coming at you. If you're a corporate attorney, the other side is coming after you. Everyone's undermining you, including people in your own firm. That's what's so scary. So this is a really hard job being an attorney. You have clients, you have opposing counsel, you have all these people that are coming after you and making you feel threatened. And because of that, a lot of attorneys feel like they're very much alone. They feel that it's threatening to them, that there's threats, that no one's got their back. And so this is really how they feel. And imagine if you're an attorney, you probably feel that way too. If you're a solo practitioner, your clients aren't paying you. If you're a law firm attorney, you're a threat of losing your job. You're all these different things. And so attorneys feel very much alone. And just because of that, if you work in a law firm, you'll see that the attorneys get very close to their secretaries or paralegals or younger attorneys if they're an older attorney, because they want to feel supported. And it's extremely important and to be supported. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. But one of the things that's very difficult for attorneys is not all, but most of them don't get into law school. They wanted to. Some of them do, some of them don't, but it's very competitive. And very few attorneys often get into the best law firms they want to. Their clients are not always happy with them. They're often undermined by their peers, meaning your people you're working with aren't really, especially at your level, are not out always to make you look good. A lot of attorneys, especially in this economy, are laid off or fired. So you're always worried about your job, and you're always worried about being humiliated in front of your colleagues. It's really competitive. And there's always people in firms, especially in large firms, that are trying to undermine you and make you look bad. I saw, it was incredible. Really it's partners a lot of times that are even more under scrutiny. I saw a partner not too long ago I was talking to at a large law firm in New York, and people said he drank too much at a party. He got into a taxi and fell down, and he was in front of a bunch of other partners. And suddenly, because they thought he drank too much, his position was at risk, and everyone kept bringing it up. And people don't feel that kind of stuff makes people insecure. And being an attorney with all the rejection and the difficulty of getting into the places you want and all these things create a lot of insecurities. And a lot of attorneys feel very unprotected and very much alone. And because it's just the way the profession works. And even if you become successful, for a lot of attorneys, you still feel that way. I read stories all the time. I run into people all the time, very successful attorneys that have drug problems and things, and then they can't get along with their spouses because they're conflicting or tired when they get home. And even the more successful you are, the more this is likely to happen. I talk to partners all the time that retire because they just can't deal with their colleagues. And so so just to give you like the reason for this, lawyers are not always, they don't feel supported. They don't feel that people have their back. And it's very difficult. They need that, and you would need that, and you need that. So this is extremely important for attorneys to feel supported and like people have their back. And all you need to do is look, in most cases, at the relationship that attorneys may have with secretaries, with paralegals and other stuff, and how, in those relationships, they don't always feel more supported, and more those people will not come after them. It's a better relationship many times than with other attorneys. And so if you are able to make other people in your firm, including associates, including junior associates lower than you, including partners and so forth in interviews, but also in your job, you're almost always never going to lose a job. You're almost never going to not get a job. And you're also never going to have too many issues getting clients and advancing if people believe you have their back. So I want to just bring up a few points and go off track a little bit here. One of the things that law school breeds, that being an attorney breeds, is this kind of fascination, and not fascination, but allegiance to your ego, meaning I need to protect myself. How does this make me look? I need to be better than this person. I need to do this. But really, the whole sea change is when you have someone else's back. And that's just a different way of thinking. It's how that people teach things in the Bible and Judaism and Islam. And a lot of the stuff, when you let your ego go and then you're able to care for others and make them feel taken care of, your whole life changes and your whole career will change. I'm not saying you'll never get laid off if there's not enough work, but if you believe that your purpose is to support others, including clients, and making people feel good, then you're in really good shape. So just again, like I said, when the law firm invites you in for an interview, they want to hire you. And the best law firms are really the best law firms because of the quality of the people working there, meaning the way attorneys think about business, their educational qualifications, and all this sort of things, and the type of people that they're giving work to. And a law firm, if they hire improperly, meaning they don't hire the right type of people, then they're in trouble. And because the only product a law firm has, if you think about it, the only thing it's selling are the people working there. And if the law firm hires the wrong people, then there's a lot of trouble. So one of the things I also say that's very important, and I want you to make sure that you understand, is when you go into interviews, your only job is to get the interview. If they say something about compensation you don't like, you just agree with it. You don't say anything and you act nice. If they say something about the culture you don't like, you just be nice. If they say something about the hours you don't like, because you want to get every interview and turn it into a job, even if it's not a job you'll take, because you can often be very surprised by things you learn, not just in interviews, but after you get the job and may ask questions. And in this rule, I'll talk about in a lot more detail, but many attorneys that are able to understand this rule of supporting others really go into interviews and get just about every job they apply for. They really don't get jobs. And they walk into interviews and they talk about how would I help? What would my biggest contribution have? What do you need? What are you looking for? I want to be committed. I want to help, and all that sort of thing. And so the number one characteristic of the people who get the most jobs, and again, I'm talking about 5 different things here, but is that they seem like they'll support the interviewer. The interviewer feels that person will help them, make them look good, all this sort of thing, because most attorneys don't feel that. If you come across in a different way, meaning you start questioning compensation, you start asking questions about negative things you've heard, you don't make eye contact with the interviewer, you don't make the interviewer feel good about themselves and like you're going to help them. There's so many things that go into this, but these are some of the most important things. You need to show up for an interview and be eager and excited and act like you're a team player, all these sorts of things. So here there's a question of what does it mean to support the interviewer? Different types of people you're going to, in an interview, you'll encounter different types of people. You'll often encounter people that, if you're not a nerd, that are very nerdy seeming, or if you are a nerd, even more nerdier than you. And these people know how others see them. They know that they're like that, and they know that people think that of them. And then sometimes there's attorneys that are the opposite. They may have great social skills and they may not be nerdy, but sometimes they don't have the same intellect. So they're insecure about that. So everyone has insecurities. Just think about yourself. There's tons and tons of insecurities. And what happens with people is they go around all closed up and protecting themselves from negative comments and avoiding situations where there's like that. And so you need to understand that everyone out there, including you, including the most successful attorneys, may have issues and be insecure about things. Sometimes successful attorneys may have had some bad things in their background. Sometimes people might be self-conscious about height and weight, but everyone has insecurities. But basically, when it comes down to it, everybody out there wants to feel accepted, loved, cared about. You too. Sometimes attorneys become attorneys because they want recognition from their parents, or they want to prove something that they're more worthy than they were when they were younger. And so people are going through life very insecure, but wanting to feel like they're loved, accepted, cared about. And that's often the greatest gift you can give someone. And so Everybody's looking for people to support them. You're looking for family members to support you. If family members don't support you, you cut them off. You're looking for significant others that support you. If they're not supporting you and going against you by who knows what, then that's going to hurt you too. You want to be like the person, want to be loved and cared about. And you want people to see the positive in you and not point out the negative. Or you want people to see the positive in your firm and not point out the negative. You want people to feel like you're excited about them, you're excited about the job. And so if you come across as someone that's going to support your interviewers and not someone who's looking for support, meaning your ego needs to be popped up by salaries, by prestige, by the type of work you're getting, then you'll be in trouble. I can think of so many cases of people destroying their career by not supporting the firm. So I had one case where an attorney was at a big firm and he said when he was hired, he wanted to do white collar work. And the firm said, okay, to the extent we have it, we'll put you on it. So then he got there and they put him on some white collar work, and then they didn't have any more. So then he said, I'm here to do white collar work. And then they said, we don't have any. So take this commercial litigation. And he refused. He refused, saying, I'm here to do white collar work. And because of that mistake, the firm let him go probably after a month or so. And he did the same thing with interviews. He said, I don't want to do only white collar work. That's all I want to do. And this is someone that went to a top 5 law school, really good background. And for the next 20 years, he's been working as a contract attorney because he's just out for himself and what he wants, and no one will hire him. So you have to go into interviews and look like you're malleable, meaning if you need help in this other area, I'm here to do it. If you need me to do this, I'm happy to do it. This is what you need. And if you go into an interview and you act, you're not gonna tolerate not getting certain types of work. You're not gonna tolerate getting certain hours. You're not going to tolerate not having seniority on things. So what does support mean? So I was working with a girl from Yale Law School not too long ago, and she'd worked at Sullivan and Cromwell and then left there because she took a job in Silicon Valley with a firm. And she got to that firm and they were giving her work that she thought was beneath her, meaning they were giving her responsibilities that she may have no longer had to do at Sullivan and Cromwell. So the same thing happened. She decided that she was better than the work and refused to do work at a lower level and lost a job. Someone from Yale Law School. People don't want to hire people that won't support them. People do not want to hire anyone that makes them feel uncomfortable. And so your ability is really going to succeed is going to be based and how much the interviewer believes you're going to support them. Even with clients, just to back up a second, if you have a client, the way attorneys get clients to pay them for things is they come in and they're like, oh, we do things this way and we can save you money. We do the work efficiently. We have all this experience. And so they basically come in and they tell most clients that they can save them money, that they do things in a certain way, that they think they have a really good chance of winning, even if they don't, all these sorts of things to make the client feel supported. And when someone's interviewing, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for someone that they feel is going to help them and make them look good. Partners, if they're hiring partners, they want to hire partners that they believe will collaborate and do well. They want to have others on their side. They want to feel like the people that they're hiring have their back. If they make mistakes, the attorney's not going to make them feel bad about it. All these sorts of things about having someone's back are just incredibly important. I've seen cases where someone was at the very top of their class, or the top 3 law school, and is at a job, and they get an assignment, and they go and they say, I'm not doing this assignment because you can do it more efficiently this way. And it's for a partner that's basically trying to get a big bill out to their clients, and then don't do it and then get fired like 6 months into the job. So this whole support is important. And a lot of firms have a difficulty finding that support. So people will join big law firms all over the country, and they'll tune out pretty quickly and not be fully engaged because they want to go in-house, or they start searching for jobs, or they're unhappy, and then that support goes away. when you're an attorney and you're hiring people, you never know who you can trust. Attorneys will go on. It's interesting. This is just an aside. I remember this big firm, they monitored all the websites that people looked at. And I don't know, I don't review this website really anymore, but they said that anybody that's ever spent time in above the law is never made partner. So I don't know, there's the connection, but what he was essentially saying was, and I just took that, and I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems weird. But the idea is that people that are looking for negativity, that are concerned about all this stuff, are really, it becomes a more ego-centered thing where they're not necessarily for the firm. I don't agree with his logic, but at the same time, the idea is that when you're concerned about what other things support your employer, meaning that is really where you stop advancing. When I was a couple months into my first legal job after a clerkship, I was asked to an assignment for this very difficult partner who has since gone to prison, which is funny. He quit the law firm, but he did this assignment and it didn't make any sense. I was a few months into the job and he was very vague and cryptic about the assignment. I told a mid-level associate about this and she started telling me how difficult it was to work with a partner, told me I needed to cover my back and write down and document everything he did, and the partner could not be trusted. And at some point she reached into she had a bag because she'd stopped by my office on the way to leaving work. And she showed me this list by date of all the slights, imagined slights, and the things that she had received during her time at the firm. And she literally spent all this time. She was a Harvard Law School graduate, very accomplished on paper, but she'd written down everything wrong that had ever been said to her, every rumor, and all these things that had happened to her at the firm. But she was someone that the law firm didn't like. They didn't consider her good at the job. And then a few months after this, she was asked to leave after making a catastrophic error in an assignment. But the thing is that people make errors all the time. So if she had been someone that had dedicated her time and her mind to doing a good job and not making these sort of errors, she would have probably been okay, because I've seen other people make serious errors. And this error was just basically forgetting to attach a document to some sort of thing submitted to the court. And because of that, they had to fight to fix it. But this is just how it is. But the idea is that what I've witnessed time and time again, when it comes to getting jobs and keeping jobs, law firms always want to avoid people who are against them. I saw something else happen in a firm once. I was in a meeting with a bunch of summer associates and attorneys, and someone got up that was head of the pro bono committee, and he seemed like he respected the firm. People were nice to him, other partners, and he got up and said that our firm has the lowest pro bono hours of any firm in New York, and this is horrible, and there's not really pro bono opportunities here. And he did this in front of the people that were on the management committee. And then literally during the summer, I saw him being yelled at and people being very unpleasant to him. And I'm sure that it changed the direction of his time in the firm. If the firm feels you're against them and you're not on the team, you're not supporting each other in the team, then you often don't do very well. I'm going to make a statement about something, but it's not necessarily a kosher thing to say. A lot of times people that were in fraternities, sororities, and other types of groups where you're supposed to be, you're loyal to your sisters or loyal to your brothers and that sort of thing, and that's enforced and you're living with people. Sometimes that sort of attitude that's bred from that can actually people can do well because people feel supported, that you're my brother or my sister, all those sorts of things. People on sports teams that have athletics in their background often do very well. So it's just, you have to have allies. People need to think that you're behind them, and that will help you do a lot. Most of the problems that I have, looking back and in relationships and my career and all sorts of other things, are because people felt I didn't support them. Employers may have felt I didn't support them. Law firms or just people that I've had bad interactions with. It's generally, if you look back in your interactions, it's generally because someone that you were talking to or dealing with didn't feel you supported them. Whether it's, I remember so many examples. I remember I have some best friends, and my best friend in fourth grade, my best friend when I graduated from when I was in law school in a firm, after the firm, both of those people, basically the relationships ended when they found out that I said something negative about them behind their back. And when it got back to them, I lost two best friends. And I remember in fourth grade, it was very difficult because not only lose a best friend, but this guy wanted to fight me all the time, and which wasn't pleasant. It was funny in retrospect, but people take it very seriously when they find out you talk negative about them or you're not supporting them. They just don't like it, and it ruins relationships. And so you need to be very careful. One time I was working in a country club, and it was a valet, and I was standing next to another valet who was a little more senior for me. This is when I was, I think, it doesn't matter when, but I was talking to a senior valet, and she asked me what I thought of my boss. And I didn't realize at the time that she was actually close with the boss. I told her that I had some problems with him. One of the things he did was, I remember on the 4th of July, the club was just bursting with people, and I had hundreds of dollars in tips. And he basically came up to me and said, give me all the money, which I thought was pretty mean. And so I talked about that. But the next morning, after I said the negative things about him, he actually called my mother and told her I was fired for talking behind his back. And so the woman went straight to him. And just because he found out I was talking negatively about him behind his back and not supporting him, he let me go. And interestingly enough, when you're in a law firm, and if you're gossiping, about people, and they believe you are, and they can see it, and you're just talking to people that they know are negative, that can definitely hurt you, and you'll be considered on the side of people that are negative. Excuse me, I don't know what's wrong with my voice right now, but there were plenty of people. The valet job was good. Plenty of people would be hungry to replace me. And then I have so many examples of this. I'll just keep telling you a few because I want you to understand how serious this is when people don't think you have their back. And I'm going into a little bit of detail here because I want you to think about examples maybe in your own life and things you've done. But when I was in my second law firm, I worked for a female partner, and her husband also worked at the law firm as a partner. And she gave me an extremely difficult assignment involving international law. Essentially, it was about $50 million that was, I don't know, from the Marcoses, that was seized, being transferred back to the Philippines or something. It was very complex. And she had been an equity partner, but then had been de-equitized and made a non-equity partner. And the law firm was she was on her way out, and she was not present intellectually at the firm. She was looking for positions when she was able to get a very awesome government position as a judge, but she's now like on top of anyway, but she wasn't putting much time. And the international issue I was dealing with was extremely complex. It was like the world's most complex LSAT problem. And even like following the logic, every sentence was interrelated. And so it took me over a week of constant study to understand this. And then when I tried to explain everything to this partner, she really could not understand it. And it was very hard for me to understand. And when she couldn't understand it, I got frustrated. She became angry with me. And then she asked her husband to review the memo. And this guy was absolutely brilliant. He spent a couple hours studying it and understood what was going on. And then he and I sat down and tried to explain it to her, but she also could still not understand it. She was embarrassed. And had she sat down and when I say it was complex, it was the most complex thing I've ever done. And she was embarrassed and then became angry at me. And I realized I had an enemy there, even though I'd done an excellent job. And what was funny is after I left the firm, and this is how complex it was, the assignment was given to an associate that was senior in the firm, and they made him partner. And when they made him partner, they talked all about his work on this issue, which is basically what I did, which is very funny. And he was in New York, I was in Los Angeles. But when I explained to the woman's husband that she didn't understand it, and I was concerned about that, this was a huge error. And of course, that kind of put me in a position where I was on the way out, because the last thing you want to do is tell another partner that some other partner is not smart or smart enough or taking the time. And so a lot of people believe that you're hired for a position because you're qualified, and because of that, the employer should hire you. But it's important to understand that just being qualified is not enough. It's the same thing with getting into schools. It's the same thing with everything, whether you're entering into a relationship with a person just because your peers doesn't mean. So every interview is a process. And I really want to emphasize this, where the employer is trying to figure out if you have their back and whether or not they believe you will support them, or will be the kind of person that undermine them. I'm thinking just of an interview I did years ago with someone that wanted to work in our company as in HR. And the guy came in and did nothing but talk about what he wanted to do, how he would increase our revenues, how he would make people happier, how he would bring in the right employees. And I couldn't believe it. I wanted to hire him on the spot. And then he said he wanted twice what I was advertising the job for. And because of how well he did in this interview, saying that stuff, I seriously considered paying him double, because no one else came in and made me feel supported. In fact, a lot of HR people are actually more on the side of the employees and the management, and they don't have the employer's back. And so that's the kind of person that I hired. I hired like the former HR director of a major law firm, and it was the same thing. So you have to be very careful. Individuals that are interviewing you need to feel like you have the back. Associates also want people who are going to make them look good and not the other way around. So they want to feel like you'll work with them, you'll be part of the team, you'll be all these different things, instead of someone that may not have their back. So just very important. Partners need to feel that way. They want to feel like you're going to support them and that you'll have their back. And you're not going to be part of these associates that are negative and leaving and focus more on themselves. And everyone everywhere needs to feel supported. I was talking not too long ago with a partner at a really big firm, a very prestigious firm, and he gave bonuses to all the associates in his office. I think the office was like 25 attorneys with 3 partners or something. And he was in charge of handing out the bonuses. And then he gave the bonuses, and half the people were mad about the bonuses and upset. And he thought he was being very generous. And suddenly, like, they were mad and not responding to emails and stuff right away. And so the other people were very happy. What he did, which I shouldn't even share with you, is he stopped giving a lot of work to the people that were complaining about the bonuses, because he felt the bonuses were really good. He felt that he should be thanked. And so he basically started replacing these people and hired me to do so, that were not doing a good job with the bonuses and so forth, that were not, I think you understand, that were not appreciative. A lot of people have this need for support. So this is just a quick story about a partner that one of the youngest and most successful partners I know grew up in a bad neighborhood. Was actually a gang member. And as a gang member, he learned from an early age the importance of loyalty. So he was an immigrant from a foreign country. He moved into a bad neighborhood because it was all his parents could afford. I think his mom was a maid, his dad worked in a dry cleaner. So he worked in this gang, and he learned the importance of loyalty. Just like when I was talking about fraternities and sororities, and everyone looked out for one another and protected each other, even if one of the people was wrong. And he learned that it's important not to undermine people. It's important to all these sorts of things you would learn in a gang. And eventually his parents became more successful, and they moved to a better neighborhood, and he was no longer part of this gang. But I'm talking about 13, 14-year-old part of a gang. I don't know, what, running drugs, and I don't know. But when he joined a law firm, he brought in that same level of commitment and did well. He learned not to fight about who got credit for bringing in business. He never made a big deal about that. And learned not to be on the side, to act like a partner trying to get the most money and all this stuff. He just was a team player. And he knew that if he started playing that game of being out for himself, eventually it would turn on him. And it does. If you don't support the people that you're working for, eventually they'll get you. So he became happy to share origination credit. He did whatever he could to see his client's point of view with everything and have their back. So he would step in and do things behind the scenes to help them. And because he did that, the clients would give him more work. It wouldn't pay, didn't even push back when he raised his rates. So when you're interviewing, this is exactly what employers are trying to do. They're trying to figure out if you're going to support them. Partners are trying to figure that out. If you're interviewing as a partner, they're trying to figure that out. If you're interviewing as an associate, they're trying to figure that out. And this is what everybody wants. It's what you want. You want to spend your time with people that support you. And when you learn to see things from the interviewer's perspective and give them the impression you'll protect them and see the world from their point of view, they're going to want to hire you. They can't help that. They want to believe you support them. So years ago, I interviewed someone. I was working for a federal judge, and this judge had the clerks decide who to interview and that sort of thing. And so we interviewed someone that was a top choice before the interview. This person had gone to a really good law school. They had great grades. I think they worked as a summer associate in a big firm and maybe did some government work before that. So they were familiar with the government, and the person was interviewing exceptionally well. But at that time, there wasn't a lot of stuff online, but there were these kind of printed books of reviews about different judges and what clients had said. And a few of the reviews of the judge were less than favorable, primarily because he was a Republican in a highly Democratic area. It doesn't really matter. And anyone that's in the public limelight, myself, anyone that people know who they are, and in a different area, meaning a judge is known for being a judge. He's not known for being anything else but that. Me too, and other attorneys and politicians. But all these people will have negative things. People don't get to power without people saying negative things about them and attacking them. Look at Trump, look at Biden. All these people are constantly coming after politicians. And this is how it works when you're influential. And that's because when you're influential, you say things and you challenge other self-worth. You upset the status quo. You often make enemies because you take sides for certain groups, and that threatens other groups. And so whatever the reason, every influential person has bad things written about them because they're going to upset someone. And so this particular guy that was interviewing from the judge asked me about these negative comments about the judge and what I thought about them. And I just defended the judge immediately. And then I informed the judge about this. And it was interesting. When I walked into his office, he was smiling, in a really good mood. And then when he heard that, his whole demeanor, like his face sank and his whole demeanor changed, and he wasn't happy. And so the person, of course, didn't get the job. And the question showed that he was able to commit to the judge's point of view. Years ago, I was interviewing this awesome guy. He had gotten an MBA from Stanford and just had really good, interesting qualifications. He'd gone to like Phillips Andover for high school and then Harvard or something. And I was interviewing him, and I had a former recruiter of mine that became a competitor that was going on all these websites and writing bad things about me. And most of them were not true. Some of them were. He said I didn't get along with my dad. But he brought these bad things about me. And this guy had read that. And I brought up, did you see any of this? Because it was coming up when people, and this is 15 years ago, when people searched my name. He said, yeah, I don't believe in that nonsense. And he just blew it off. And so I liked him. I made him an offer. He didn't accept because I think he got a job with a very significant private equity firm, but anyway, or investment banking firm. But the way, if you ask questions about negative things, people feel not supported. And when I interview people that I don't think will defend me and will be a potential problem, I'm not interested in talking to them anymore. And when people don't show that alliance, it's not helpful. And everyone wants to have people close to them that they can trust. It's very difficult. Look at all the people that undermine politicians. Look at all the people, whistleblowers, and people that go to the press and people that sue employers. And this is scary for employers. They want to eliminate people that they think have a chip on their shoulder, and this is what employers are looking for. They need to feel supported. And again, I'm spending a lot of time on this because how important it is. It will change your career if you understand this, just really will. And a lot of the people that I've interviewed in the past just come in and look like they're going to support you. And I've interviewed people, like one person I interviewed literally came in with a business plan for the company, and then told me from what he just found publicly. And so I made him an offer because he was just all over helping. Another person I interviewed, it was very interesting. It wasn't even that important of a job. It was something that maybe, I don't know, it was an hourly position and it didn't have, I mean, it wasn't a lot, but it was a good job because it was in the kind of thing this guy wanted to do. But he came in for the interview and had read, and he wasn't an attorney. He'd read tons of my articles, like on my blog and BCG, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow, this guy's reading and studying all this stuff. And he said I was underutilizing the things I wrote. And obviously I made him an offer. I was like, wow, this guy loves me. Of course he looks great. And people that show up for interviews and smile and talk about how much they respect the firm or the company and making the interviewers feel important, all that stuff is important. And if the interviewer thinks you like them and they believe they can trust you, they're going to want to give you a position. That's how it is. So you have to, these are the people we like. We like people that like us, and we don't like people that don't like us. And you have to make people feel that way. This is exactly most of the time when you go out in interviews and you don't do this and you ask questions, you don't sound enthusiastic, you don't seem like you'll have someone's back, you won't get the job. But if you do this, you will get the job. And why do I say this? And like, how could I possibly know all this? The reason I know this is because I talk to people all the time that get every job that they've ever walked into and applied to. Meaning, if you give me an interview, I will get the job. And they're right. But this is what they do. This is their secret. So if you're going down on interviews and not getting jobs, this is what you're not doing right. Now, there's other things you're not doing right that I'll talk about. This is the most important. And if you don't get positions, you're not doing this. You need to connect with a person. You need to be likable, and you need to find reasons to like the interviewer. When I started in recruiting, I did this thing where I would literally meditate every day, thinking about how much I liked the people that were in law firms doing recruiting that were interviewing my candidates. And that's one of the best things I did. So when I talked to the law firms, they just felt this guy loves us. He connects with us. He thinks we're a big deal. And that's just how it works. And every interviewer wants people that are going to see their point of view and make them feel important. That's exactly what I did with the law firms. And it worked incredibly well. Thinking about why I liked them, thinking about what was good about them, thinking about why they were good. I mean, all these things. And that's what employer needs. And employer needs signals that show that. And they don't want to hire people that don't like them, that aren't impressed with them. And they just need people to support them. Just a few things. People are tribal animals. It's in our DNA. It was until we had an agrarian society where people had farms and things, people just lived in small groups and they hunted together and that's still in our groups of 30 to 60 people. I remember studying this in anthropology. I'm not saying that I understand it perfectly, but it's the idea that people are ingrained to have tribes and to be in that and in tribes that support them. And when you have things, people identify with things like living in the same area, knowing certain people, having gone to certain schools, having certain interests, having certain backgrounds. These are all identifiers that people are looking for when they interview people. What do you have in common with me? How can I trust you? And I've seen this multiple times. I've seen people like walk into an interview and see a picture of some weird sport like bocce ball or something. And the person says, wow, I love bocce ball too. And I love this. And they connect on that. And there's a hiring because the person feels like they know them. The person walks in to an interview and they both were in the same club in college. All these sorts of things help. And so the more you can identify with your interviewer and find commonalities, like you're part of the same tribe, the more the interviewer is going to like you. And this is what groups of people do. Law firms support their clients in their groups. Law firm companies come together in a mission. It's Google, we do search engines or whatever. And so people come together as groups because that's why groups exist. They exist because people want to feel supported by other people. And early in my career, I'd watched the first person I interviewed was a bookkeeper. And so I always noticed with the most successful entrepreneurs, this is when I was young, they always had really good bookkeepers close to them. And those bookkeepers had worked for them for a long time. And I didn't understand this. However, I realized that this must be something that's very important and there needs to be a level of trust between the bookkeeper. And that's why I realized how important it was. I prioritized that. And then the person I ultimately hired was someone who'd worked for 20 years for the previous employer for 20 years before the employer sold their business. And what you can see, this is very interesting. When you see people that are staying at the same position for a long period of time, generally the reason for that is the person believes they have their back. And each person, but the employer has the back of the person working for them, the person working for them has a lot. So a lot of times people, and I'm not criticizing this because obviously I'm a recruiter and I move people between firms, but what happens a lot is people that move firms a lot and jobs a lot, it's often a sign that wherever they go, they're not loyal, that they don't have the employer's back. And so people in business and law firms will look at people that move a lot as maybe not the kind of person that will support them. So you need to come into interviews and you need to convince people that this is the kind of environment where you would support people and where people would feel supported by you. And because of whatever's happened, you've arrived to this place. And how does that work? I joined this group. I wasn't a good fit for because of this. But I learned this about myself, and I joined this firm and I learned this about myself. And this is the accumulation of all my experience that I belong in a place like this. And when I hired this bookkeeper, she came in, she smiled, she was happy. She talked about her previous boss, how she had his back, and act like she'd do the same for me. And I hired her. And then she worked for me for over a decade because she had my back. And what's interesting with her is I actually let her go when she didn't have my back. So what she had done was she had basically hired this huge accounting department, not huge, but like 4 or 5 people to help her. And then we went into a recession in like 2008. We didn't have as many people working there. So there were certain people that I needed to let go. And when that happened, she refused. So she just kept all these people that were unneeded. And she had actually changed her alliance, not towards me, but to someone else. And so that was the problem. So if someone has our back, we definitely want to keep them around. We want to hire them. We want to and do this as well as you can. And people lose their jobs when law firms believe they don't have their back. And so this is getting hired. Really, the employer needs to believe you have their back. And they're just looking for these kind of clues. They're saying like, will this person talk negatively about me and others at the firm? I shouldn't even, I'm not going to say the firm's name, but there's this giant firm, world mega firm based in New York. Someone went on Above the Law or something and wrote a comment that was just pretty sick, not sick, but a long comment about how negative the firm was and problems. And so there was no way to identify based on what the person wrote who it was. So the firm just pulled up records of all the people that had been above the law or whatever, whenever that was timestamped or whenever the comment came. They narrowed it down to a couple of people and they discovered who wrote the comment and they just fired them. It was like a 6-year attorney. So people don't like it when you talk negative about them. People don't like it when you're unhappy with your compensation or hours. People don't like it when you look like someone that won't stick around. And if the firm isn't a good fit, you'll just leave right away. And so you need to understand how things work. Society is incredibly polarizing. Just understand how different political parties work and how they're angry with each other, how unions are against companies, how companies, all this stuff that happens. People that are rich and poor kind of fighting, people that are Democrat and Republican, but you need to hire people that make you feel safe. And again, I'm not going to talk any more about this because I've really droned on a long time, but you definitely need to make sure that whoever you're interviewing with feels supported, feels like you're on their side and that you're someone that's very safe for them to hire because you're going to do a great job and you're going to be on their side. The second you send out clues that you're not, the second you're not, that's when you're not hired. The second you send clues out to your current job that you're not on their side, that's when you stop getting hired. Law firms often, if they find out you're interviewing somewhere else, they would take that as a negative too. So you just have to be very careful about this. You should write this down, look at this, make my employer feel supported, make my interviewer feel supported. And this is really one of the most important rules, make my clients feel supported for being successful in the practice of law. You cannot ignore this rule. If you do, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a hard career. You're not going to advance, and you're not going to be in a place where you can be with your career if you follow it. So this is another thing that's related, but people hire people that really want the job and want to work there. They want to feel like this is important to you. They feel that way, it makes them feel like their brand's respected. And when I was deciding where I wanted to work as an attorney, and I'll take questions, by the way, on the first thing and these other ones when the presentation is done, which these next three are a lot faster, or four. After I'd worked for a judge and two law firms. I was still at the second one. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to practice law anymore. And I went out and started interviewing with law firms. I certainly didn't get a position in every law firm I interviewed with. In fact, my batting average was very low. I usually was able to get screening interviews, and then I was also able to take those and then put those in and get those second round interviews. But at this point, I didn't want to practice law anymore. I was just going to interviews because basically I quit the firm and they told me to stay around for 3 months and apply to other jobs, and that would help me. But I shouldn't apply when I was unemployed. I was actually planning on doing something else, starting a solo practice because I had clients. But anyway, the point is that most of the firms I interviewed with weren't interested in hiring me because I didn't come across as enthusiastic and really wanted the job. I was interviewing with Simpson Thacher in New York for a position in their Los Angeles office. And then there was a very well-known attorney, and his name was Barry Ostrager. He's now a judge, but he was one of the most known insurance coverage attorneys in the country. And I interviewed with him, and he said he could tell I didn't want the job, but he wanted to get a few. He just brought me into his office when I was 3 or 4 interviews in. And because the firm really wanted to hire me, they basically said, you're hired, just go out to New York and meet a few people, and then it's a done deal. But he said he could tell I didn't want the job. And so I didn't get this job at the firm. And that happened because obviously he was smart and he could tell that. And so he didn't want to hire me. And it's very challenging to get a job if you don't want it. If you don't want something, then law firms can pick up on it. And if you think that way, then you won't get the job. My father, and I don't talk too much about my family, but my father was in the CIA. And he said one of the first things that he learned when he was a young CIA person is he used to go in this kind of weird way where I think it was in Switzerland, and he would just go to these different doctors. And when he would get in there would be like an exam room, and that would be where the person was waiting. It was funny. I don't know why it worked that way back then, but he told stories about that. But anyway, he went into one of these meetings with one of his handlers, and he started saying something negative about someone that he was supposed to get close to in order to get information. And then the handler said something that I've never forgot. He said, don't think it or you'll show it. Meaning, if you think something negative about a firm, they're going to pick up on it. If you think something positive, then they'll pick up on it. But you can't go in thinking negative things about whoever you're interviewing with. You may think, oh, the attorneys aren't qualified, or, oh, the work doesn't look good, or, oh, well, you can't think those. But good law firms can tell if you don't really want the job. And they can tell if you've left to go in-house. They can tell that your reasons you give for leaving firms aren't good. They can tell if you change practice areas, if you have gaps in your resume, if you do other things that maybe give signals you don't want to work there. And sometimes people show up for interviews and have a sense of indifference to their work. So what does that mean? The best attorneys, by the way, will have a lot of enthusiasm and talk about their practice area. They'll have deep insight into it. I remember I was interviewing with this one law firm, and all I could talk about was how excited I was about the litigation, how I like this and that and this and that, and how I'd read this and then these foreign files. And they were like all over it. They offered me an interview. This is one of the firms when I was not interested in practicing law, but I went and I just talked about all this and it works. So this is all important. You have to you have to look like you're very committed to the work. You have to talk about how you really want to work in a law firm, how you have good feelings about the law firm, how working there would be great for you. This is even if deep down you won't, because you always want to get the job, and you have to come across that way. And if you don't, you're not going to get the position. And when I interview people, I always look for that. I had an instance the other day where I interviewed where I was actually recruiting a recruiter to work here. And when I recruited the recruiter, she was talking about the first call I had with her was weird. It was like the first day I'd recruited her, and her husband, her email had been hacked or something. So she thought maybe I was part of this hack. She was weird about it. And then after the interview, her husband actually texted me and said, I'm really sorry. Like, she was weird because her thing was hacked. And I told her that talking to you, you were probably this and that, and she really wants the job. And so I love that. She wanted the job. She knew about our company. She was really excited. She even had her husband step in and apologize that she didn't sound that enthusiastic in her first interview. It was fun. But I thought, wow, that person must really want the job. So this is about interviewing someone for a clerical position. A woman was working for me to do that. She was asked about some aspects of her experience. And when that happened, she said, well, you can see that on my resume. You don't need to ask me that. You can, it's on my resume. And of course, this person didn't want the job. If people act like that, then you obviously don't want to hire them. When at our company, when people apply, it's very hard to be a recruiter at our firm. If you get 100 applications, we might interview one. Sometimes it's a lot higher than that. This is probably a little bit exaggerated because it's not always that number. It could be 5, but and then when I interview people, I don't hire a lot of them. And the reason that I don't hire people is they don't take time to study our company and me and that sort of thing. And so they come in and they just ask questions that are obvious. So this is the same thing you should do with an employer. You should know when you go and do an interview everything about that employer. And you don't have to tell them you read their website, but you can say, yes, I'm aware of that. And this is what I like about it. And I thought this is interesting. And there's 13 people in this practice area that I'm in. Are you planning on hiring more? Those sorts of things. And if you show up knowing what the employer does, it makes it look like you want the job more. And these are people that do well. It's like this with all employers. And you show up for interviews, you need to be prepared, know about the employer. You need to make the employer feel like everything that they're doing is exciting to you. And you need to mean it, meaning a lot of times people will go into interviews and they'll be like, yes, I like that. But they're not really connecting. You don't really believe them. And so you need to be coming across as believable and interested in the employer. And then the employer really needs to believe it. It's not just because you want a high salary, it's because or the firm's prestigious or you need a new job. It's because there's something special and unique about the employer that makes them feel like you like them. And I can't emphasize this enough. Make the employer feel like you think they're special. Believe in the employer. Meditate even before you go in and think about the reasons you want the job. And even if it's because you need a job and you're unemployed, just think about, how do I connect with this person? How do I have a good experience with them? How do I make them like me? How do I make them feel like there's someone that I really want to be there, that really wants to be there? My mom likes to tell the story. She's told it a bunch of times. But it's when I was younger, she took me to eventually agreed. I was begging for months to let me get a dog. We went to a house with this large litter of 10 or 12 puppies. They pretty much all looked the same. But one of the puppies came up to me and wouldn't stop kissing me and jumping on my lap, while the other ones were just wandering around. And I chose that puppy. And basically what she said was, you chose the person that liked you. That's how you made the decision. And that's the same thing with employers. It's the same thing with everyone. We choose who we like and who likes us. And the people that like us are the ones that we reciprocate and like back. So I want everyone to understand how important the statement is, because if someone likes you, then you're much more likely to like them back. So you need to think about, how do I like this employer? What do I do? How do I make them feel I like them? How do I make the person talk, that make them feel like I really want to work there and I really want them. And if people understand that, you're going to do much better. I had this thing happen to me in my first year of law school. I was single, and one day this girl walked up to me and who was attractive to me. And she told me that she'd been staring at me and smiling at me and seeing me all these different places, grocery stores, parties and things, for a long time. And that other guys came up and talked to her. I'd never spoken with her. And she told me all this and said I'd walked by and ignored her all this time and didn't notice her. And this girl was my type, just completely. And when she said all this stuff, I was flattered. So she literally walked up and said, I like you. I've been watching you for a long time. You've been ignoring me. I'm desirable. Other people have done this. And then she actually said, can I buy you a beer? And I was like, all right. So all this stuff was very flattering to me. And then it was fun. She had this really nice sports car, and we went out for a drive like the same night we met, and just a lot of great chemistry. But someone, all because the person said that she walked up and said she liked me. And I don't know that's proper for everyone to do, but it worked for me. And so just to give you a cap about how effective that was, less than 6 months later, we were living together. And then a few years after that, we were married. And the reason all this happened is because she came up and was basically like, I think you're awesome, and flattered and that sort of thing. So employers are like this too. When you generally like an employer and you want to work for them, and then they're going to like you back. And it's the same thing. You could end up a partner there. You could end up spending your entire career there. And having that level of enthusiasm is something that really makes you rise above the crowd of other applicants. And if you know about the employer and who they are, what they stand for, they're much more likely to hire you than if you do not. And so it's the same thing with relationships. If someone likes us, they make us feel supported, they really want to be in a relationship with you, you're much more likely to reciprocate. And then if people express doubts, now there are some personalities where that's actually, they like that. But if you're psychologically healthy and people have all these doubts about you and negatives, and they're not completely for you, then you're probably not going to like them and you're going to avoid them. Relationships go bad with significant others, when one side stops believing in the other. That's just how it works. And this is why people break up. And often when you're interviewing with legal employers, you really need to show the employer that you're interested in them, that you want the job. You need to prepare. You need to look the part. You need to do everything you can to try to figure out what the culture is beforehand and try to figure out how you can do that. You need to be enthusiastic and realize that all employers, by the way, are very insecure. They will be insecure about interviewing you if they don't think you'll take the job because you're at a more prestigious firm. They're often insecure about how others perceive them compared to other firms. They're insecure about sometimes the quality of their attorney. They're insecure about how much they pay if they don't pay a lot. They're insecure about negative news stories that have come on. They're insecure about how nice they're all. Employers are insecure. And a lot of them, the most powerful firms, don't need a lot of validation. But when you come in and you validate a firm and you make them feel like there's something special and you have reasons for doing so, they're much more likely to hire you. And it's the same thing with you. When people see the best in you and want a relationship with you, and if they're genuine, you're more likely to want them. I've been in these relationships before where the person's just, yeah, I like you, you like me, it's great. But it's just superficial. And you don't want that. You want people to really be interested in you. And if you do that, then you're going to be much better off. I've encountered attorneys all the time that can work anywhere. They have large books of business. They graduated from the best law school. They have really good experience. And these types of attorneys can always get interviews. But what they do a lot of times with all this is they show up and they act not completely interested in the firm, and they don't really connect with the firm. And these people do not get hired. And it happens all the time. I can think of several examples of really good attorneys that have built books of business and all this stuff. But when they go into interview, they're just, maybe this firm's beneath me, or I'm not going to make enough money. If they just come in with this attitude. I've got one partner right now that started his career, I think, at Cravath, and went to a really big firm. And after 8 or 9 years at Cravath, and he's been on 10 or 12 interviews and just comes in and acts like he's better than the firm. It's what can you do for me? And everyone's like, nothing, because you're not interested in us. The idea is you just want to come across as someone that really wants the job. Just think about you and the people that you've dealt with in your career and life that are interested in you, and compare that with the people that aren't, and how that makes you feel. How, if you choose friends, the friends are based on, a lot of your friendships are based on the kind of people that like you, that you feel have your back, that are all that sort of stuff. And so this is how you need to act. You need to act like you really want to work there and make people feel that when they interview you, because if you don't, then there's no reason for them to hire you. They're not going to like you as much. And so this is the way to get jobs. It's the way to get clients. It's the way to really excel. So this is the other thing. This one is not as important as the other ones, but the employers are always asking if you'll do the job in the way they want it done. Different people have different expectations. Sometimes they want to do things in a certain way. Other times they don't. I had this interesting thing happen. This is not too long ago. I had this firm, this job that was in-house that I was recruiting for in Louisiana. And I don't do a lot of in-house placements, but this was an interesting one. They were looking for an in-house counsel to handle, I think, patent litigation cases they were involved in or something. And they had a bunch of them, and they wanted to pay the person, I don't know, like $300,000 a year or something to just basically do this. So they didn't have to pay law firms millions of dollars a year. But I got all these applications. I got them from partners at Am Law 100 law firms and all these people. And then I had one application from this guy that was in Illinois, unemployed, and had worked at a big firm before. So what happened is I sent the firm these really high qualified applications, but each one of them went in and said, yes, we will be your in-house attorney. And these are people that are making over $1 million a year, a lot of them, these partners, maybe two. And we're just interested in working in-house and willing to take a pay cut. But their idea was, that I'll come in, I'll hire a bunch of attorneys to help me, I'll manage the cases. This is how they all work. And this person that was hiring was like, no way, I want people to actually litigate these so we can pay $300,000 a year for you and maybe to litigate these, and maybe a couple $100,000 for a couple people to help you. This is what the company wanted. And so no one that was interviewing for this job was doing that. I sent this, and the first thing they did was they did phone interviews so these interviews happened over the phone with these big time attorneys. And this is basically how they came across. And then the firm was like, send me some more people. So I just threw in the guy in Illinois because I thought he was just a really nice guy. And so they had 4 or 5 more interviews scheduled. And then the first interview was with the guy in Illinois, and it was a phone interview, but he said, I want to fly out and interview for this. Can I meet you in person? Or he told me that, can I meet them in person? And the guy that was hiring in the company said, yeah, hell yeah, you can. So he flew down to Louisiana from Chicago and went in, and within a half hour, the guy called me, maybe a half hour, like an hour, and said, we're giving this guy the job. He knows exactly what we want. He's going to do it. And he is happy to litigate the cases. He doesn't think we need to hire people. So he was doing exactly what the firm wanted. So they were taking someone that was unemployed, that he was actually older. So he was, I think, in his late 50s, which is fairly old for an attorney. And they hired him, and he said, I'm not going to hire, I want to cancel all the interviews. This guy's great. And they hired him. So it's someone, he did the job the way they wanted it done. And other people will come in and have all these preconceptions and don't tell the employer that they'll do things the way they want to. They'll say, oh, maybe this should be done a different way, maybe this, maybe that. So attorneys, law students, and others will often blow this by setting limits on how they will not work and how they'll do different things in the interviews. They say, I want to do things this way, or I am only willing to work these hours. I want Wednesdays off, all these sorts of things. They'll come in and they'll say, and they won't get the job. I want to work remotely. And these things just get you dead. You're dead in the water. You have to basically come in and act like you're going to do what the employer wants. And you can't do this. Again, interviews go sideways because people say, oh, I'm not willing to take depositions at this point in my career. I prefer to work remotely. I only want to work on this sort of case. I prefer all these sorts of things. And when you say this stuff, you're just basically saying, hey, just qualify me from the job. Because the law firm knows that if you have all these expectations and you have all these things that you want to say, they know that it's just going to get worse. They're not going to have control over you, and you're going to basically be rogue, and that's going to hurt you. So this is how it works. And now, if law firm partners are working in the office, not all of them do. Certainly a lot of them are remote these days. But if someone you're working for in the office working for is going to the office, I would say you have to too, because the partners want to be able to stop by and talk to you. They want to feel important that they have these subordinates. They want to they be able to give feedback and all this sorts of things. And it's just, that's what a lot of partners want. Just be like, I have no problem being in the office. I'll do whatever you need. I'm a team player, all those sorts of things. And this is what people in power want. They want people to support them. They want them to do the job in the way they want it done. And it's the same thing. What is a family for? A family's a place where you return at night, where you support your kids, or hopefully they support you, where you support your significant other, where you have parents that support you. They've got your back. Look at millions of examples. Look at Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Look at some of the stuff Hunter's done, which is insane. The pictures and it's crazy, but he still supports his son. And this is what families do. And he supports it, even though he's arguably one of the more important people in the world. He's just going right to the support. Our families are supposed to support us. We call our families when we have trouble. They support us. We're always there for them. And so it's the same thing with your work people. Your work people need to feel supported. I'm sorry to keep coming back to this, but families support the way you do things is really an important point. And a lot of times when people go into interviews, they'll talk about how they want this day off. They'll talk about this that they want. And so all the law firm is doing is they're comparing you to others that they're interviewing with that may do the work in the way they want it done. And so there's nothing wrong with this, that you are entitled to have these requirements. But just remember that if you have these requirements and others don't, the law firm is more likely to hire the people that don't have those requirements. So it's FaceTime, setting limits for your availability, requesting all this sorts of thing. If you do that, the law firm may want that. And if you don't do it, they're just going to hire someone that does. And then a lot of times attorneys will go into interviews and they'll say how the work should be performed. And this is an example that I gave you earlier. But the law firms, this is what they want. They want people that will do the job and the way the law firm wants it done. And this is a very difficult job that I do, is because there's just a lot of things. When I hire recruiters, a lot of times recruiters will come in, and I have this problem a lot. I tend to hire people that haven't been recruiters, because people will come into our company and they will think they know how to do everything. And yet there's all these things that happen. You have to review jobs each morning. You have to do research of employers. You need to position people that are looking for jobs in certain ways. You need to understand how to do the job. And so people will come in and they'll just be like, I know how to do it. I don't need to learn anything. And those people are just blown out of the water. It's also like that with a lot of the most prestigious firms. Like you take Cravath or Wachtell or Sullivan and Cromwell. These firms typically only hire from their summer programs because they want people to do the work they want it done. They don't want to have to train people to do things. People come in and the law firms want people to do the work in the way they want it. And this is just an example. We've never hired someone that's had experience working as a legal recruiter elsewhere. Now, that's not to say we never will, but there's only a few times when we've done it. And when we have, it's rarely worked because the people do the work in the way they want to, and that's incompatible to how we work. So those people do poorly. And the one that thrives are the ones without experience and willing to do the job that we need, the way we need it done. And legal employers are the same way. They want to hire people to do things their way and not set in their ways or highly opinionated about how they're doing the work. Just think about it. This is really important. Now, if you don't look like you're going to follow directions, then you have your own opinions and you have limits for the type of work you're going to do or anything that contradicts what the employer wants, and they don't hire you. This is by the way, when I talk to employers after interviews, this is something they bring up all the time. They bring up that the people that they're, working for, they bring up that the interviewers said these sorts of things, and just, saying things like they hate going on client dinners. They don't want to travel. They don't want to spend time in committees. All the sorts of things. They want to leave by this train time. And so when you talk about this, the law firm will just disqualify you. They typically, what they want, and I hate to keep talking about this, but it's very important, is they want people that are soldiers. So what is a soldier? You give a soldier an order and you're like, okay, just run into all these bullets that are coming and do what we ask you. and don't question it. This is what soldiers do. The soldier's job is not to debate with the general or the colonel or is asking them to do. It's just to do what they want. And so if you don't and you show up and you act like you're not going to be a soldier, then the law firm is not going to hire you. If you talk about how you weren't a soldier and running into battle and following orders in your last job, the firm's also not going to hire you. So just keep this all in mind. You can't talk about anything that makes it look like you're not going to follow directions and do things the way the law firm wants it done. It's as simple as that. And the better you do that, the more likely you are to get the job. And then this is just another one. There's two more of these. These are pretty quick, the last two. But the fourth one is, will this attorney make us look good and do they represent how we want to see ourselves? All that means, you can get in the door with most employers if your resume is good. But if you don't think that, if you're not going to make the employer look good in the way they want to see themselves, then they're not going to be hiring you. So what does that mean? It means how you dress, how you speak, how you carry yourself, other traits that reflect whether you'll make the employer look good or not. Those are important. Sometimes people show up for interviews. They may act awkwardly. They may not make eye contact. They may speak inappropriately. They may have clammy handshakes. They make all sorts of mistakes, and the employer doesn't feel like they're going to make them look good. So that means things like how you dress, how you're groomed, and then same thing with a Zoom conversation, how you present yourself, how you look at the camera, all those sorts of things. And so if you're not doing this, and then the employer is going to conclude that you'd also act this way with clients. I remember interviewing someone, this is funny, but this is an extreme example, someone that was absolutely incredible on paper. But when they came into the interview, after I'd had a phone interview with them, they smelled like smoke so badly that my eyes were watering. And then the person was also coughing up phlegm. This is an older attorney during the meeting. And so, of course, I didn't hire her. That's not the kind of person I want to represent me in the market. I've also interviewed other people for positions, and I don't have anything against people with tattoos, but I interviewed someone that had tattoos literally starting at their arms and going up there, and then also up to their chin. And that was scary. Not that I disliked that. There's anything wrong with that, but I didn't know. I don't think that would be a good thing for our company. And then I had another thing happen that I remember. It's funny, but I interviewed someone for a highly qualified person for a job. He'd gone to Columbia Law School and just had all these great things. And then before the interview, he asked to use a bathroom that was in my office that everyone shared. And I thought this interview went very well. But after he left, I walked into the office and I noticed he'd peed all over the toilet seat, and which I believed it was him because of kind of his attitude. And I didn't hire him. Meaning he was very confident and just a little bit. And then how you talk, your confidence and your mannerisms and how you look and act like the people there and seem to share their interest in things is important. This is an interesting story. I interviewed a guy once that was first in his law. He was from a good law school, and was at a very good firm, but he needed a job. But his hair was down to his hips. He had meaning his buttocks, and he had all these things about how he wasn't going to cut it. And so he was getting interviews at all these prestigious law firms. They certainly weren't saying anything about his hair, but the law firms didn't like it. And he, of course, didn't get hired. He was to the point where he was very depressed. He was acting crazy, like he divorced his wife because she was just all this stuff. And because he was so insistent on having this haircut, not cutting his hair. And so this stuff happens. If you come into a law firm and you don't look appropriate, then law firms will be very nervous. I had one woman that would wear a dog collar into interviews. Again, I'm not judging that, but this kind of stuff often doesn't work in law firms. And a year ago, I was interviewing a very highly qualified attorney for an attorney position. When I was speaking to this guy, he was talking about how depressed he was and how his father had committed suicide at his age. And actually, I was interviewing him for law firms and he went on his interviews and he came across as very low energy and sad because he was just very depressed. And so he should have taken care of that before he started interviewing. And of course, you can fix that with therapy and medication. But he just kept doing that. And so you're a representative of the law firm, and the law firm you need to reflect how the law firm sees and wants to see itself. And different law firms have different characters of people. But you need to be confident. You need to look the part as much as you can. You need to dress the part, and you need to get a sense of what the attorneys are like before you're interviewing. So you can go to certain law firms' websites, and you can see that a bunch of them are members of conservative groups or liberal groups or like sports, and you can get a sense of the way the law firm people are, and then you go from there. But you should also think about what you would want for an attorney representing you. So if you need an attorney, what would you expect them to be? Like if you were hiring someone, what would you think? How would you want them to look? I remember once I was interviewing, or I had a friend that was interviewing with headhunters in New York, or had a headhunter, and he went into the headhunter's office, and the headhunter was incredibly well dressed, and his teeth were shiny white and a great haircut. And that's all the guy would talk about is, this guy's so put together. He's awesome. And I like him. When I was a summer associate, there was a partner in the firm I was at that had the largest book of business. And that partner used to dress incredibly well and stand himself up, groomed, suntan, I don't know, but healthy. And then he used to tell the associates that if you're charging over $1,000 an hour, you need to walk into interviews, and you need to walk into your client's office and be like the most put together and confident person in the room. And I think that's true. So you just need to act and look at the part. You need to suppress to some extent your individuality. So things like I had a woman that would go into interviews with nose rings, and that doesn't help a lot of places. Now, it's not all places, but it doesn't help. Another woman that had several rings on her ear, another woman that, and men too, just different things. You need to be very careful. There was one firm in Los Angeles where I used to work at, was Quinn Emanuel, and there was no dress code at this firm, like none. But people would put on suits when they went into court or when they met with clients. But when they were working in the firm, there's no dress code. Every year when they would interview summer associates, and people would do things like show up in shorts and basically the way that the law firm let them dress. And those people would not get interviews because the law firm felt that was disrespectful and other things. So you have to be careful. And your interviewers will also look up your social media profiles. They're going to look up how you portray yourself on LinkedIn, how you portray yourself on Facebook, how you portray yourself on Instagram. They're going to look all this up, and they're going to say, is this person look clean? Is this the kind of person, if our client looks them up, what is the client going to think? So if you have all these pictures of doing bong shots and standing on your head drinking beer and just acting crazy, then obviously they're not going to hire you. But people make this mistake all the time. So you need to be very careful of how you portray yourself, because the law firms knows the clients are also going to look like that, and extreme politics and other things. You just need to be very careful. You need to look at how the law firm ultimately represents you. And then this is the final one. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, and then we'll take a quick break and questions. But the fifth one is, do I like this attorney more than the other people I'm interviewing? You have to stick out. You have to be the most likable. And when sometimes you're interviewing multiple people for the same position, and law firms are often going to make this determination based on how well you've done the other four. So if you look like you have their back, if you look like you're interested in the position, you want the position, all those are the reasons, then they're more likely to hire you. Regardless of the time you go into the interview, the employer has mostly made up their mind about the type of person they want to hire. And if you're not that person, then you need to obviously be likable. And likability often isn't within your control. So one of the rules that I've heard a lot, and I just repeat, is that 1/3 of the people we meet automatically will not like us, 1/3 will not care either way, and the other third will like this. Often they make those conclusions just based on seeing you and not even knowing. They make it subconscious, but you have to look at the most likable person and realize that everyone's competing to be liked. And understanding how to be likable is important. Likable people do not brag. Likable people act like they're not better than others. Likable people, it's very interesting. Like when I meet people that are, I meet people sometimes that are really wealthy, hundreds of millions of dollars, and they basically look like I'm getting by, I'm doing the best I can. They often will drive old cars, and sometimes because they don't want to draw attention and make people not like them. Same thing with people that go to Harvard a lot of times. They'll say, when I was at school out east. And so people don't want to make others feel intimidated. They want to be likable. So being understated, acting like you're not going to try to get credit for everything. A lot of people will brag on their resume. So they'll say things like, I was doing a resume workshop yesterday. Oh, and by the way, I do them every week. So if you're a candidate, you always should get emails about it. But I was doing a resume workshop yesterday, and this one resume, the person was saying, I was selected among 6 people to do this job. I was a top 10% of this firm. I got these great reviews. And so that person was not likable, and they weren't getting interviews. And it was basically because they were just telling everyone how great they are compared to other people. And people don't like that. People don't like others that talk too much about their achievements on their resume or in person. The best resumes, by the way, I was talking to this woman this morning that she went to Yale College and was top of her class, and then went to I think Harvard Law School, and had worked at 2 great firms, and was incredibly likable. She just was thankful I was calling her, but even on her resume, even though all these great things happened, there was no bragging. It was just like, I'm doing this, and this is what people like. People like people that are human as well. So that means making a connection. If you can, and it comes up, you can talk about things that are similar. Sometimes your interviewer may say, I have a 8-year-old boy, and you can say, I have an 8-year-old girl or 10-year-old girl. And if the person talks about their hobbies or other things in their office that show they have these hobbies and you can identify with them, you talk about that. If the person talks about mistakes they made, you can maybe talk in how you've learned from them. So you want to be likable. People like people that are vulnerable, by the way. Like if someone comes across as knowing everything and is not vulnerable, then we don't like them. We like people that are trying to improve ourselves. We like people that are vulnerable. We like people that are human. So just looking like you're some superstar attorney is not going to make you likable. If you go into associates and you act like you're better than all the other associates in your firm and incredibly competitive, the associates you're interviewing with aren't going to like you. You need to tone everything down. Because if you look like you're a competitor and everything, they're not. Now, you can do that with partners to some extent, but you just need to be very careful. You need to connect. And everybody is looking for connection, by the way. People do everything they can to connect. Sometimes people buy expensive cars because they think that other people will respect them and connect with them. A lot of times people join churches, they join different groups, they seek out friends, they try to connect with all. This is what life's about. And people feel much less connected now than they used to. 100 years ago, when people lived in small towns, and it's just people feel very unconnected. And so if you can connect with people, you're going to be much better off. One of the best ways to connect with people is to allow people to talk about themselves. And you can you ask people questions about themselves. You ask them questions in a way that they're talking about positive aspects of themselves that they're proud of. This is something, by the way, that I've noticed hands down that the most successful people do. But even the smartest people, the people that get ahead, the people that just do well at everything, like I talk to them and I realize 10 minutes in the conversation, all the person's doing is asking me questions about things that I'm excited about, that I like about myself. They just figure it out and they just start asking those questions. And believe me, these are the most successful people. It's not the least successful. It's always the most successful people are able to do this. I don't know why it is, but it's a very awesome trait if you can get people can get you to talk about aspects of yourself you like, because if they do, they'll like you. You should, in a lot of interviews, if you're doing 20% of the talking, the other person's doing 80, talking about themselves, that's actually really good. Now, just talking about the job and things is usually okay, but people will just talk about the job, and that's impersonal. People can talk about themselves, things they've learned, their families, other things, and people will like you. It's just very important to remember. It's something that's covered. And if you are interested in this stuff, you could take like a Dale Carnegie course. This stuff is covered there. You always want people to talk about themselves. People like people that use their name a lot. You ask questions about others. But if you ask questions to make people defensive, then they're not going to like you. If you ask questions about negative things, they're not going to like you. If I need a favor from someone, if I'm asking somebody for something, what I will typically do is I will start the conversation asking the person just to talk about something that there's interest in it, whether it's their family or whatever. I will try to flatter the person or get the person to talk about themselves. And after they talk about themselves for several minutes, then I will ask them for whatever they need. And so if I'm doing the most speaking, if you find yourself doing the most speaking, people aren't going to be as impressed and like you as much if they're doing the speaking. So again, the most successful people are the best listeners, ask the best questions, ask questions that make others feel good about themselves. Very important. So you ask questions that the person's going to like and make them like themselves and actually more personal rather than business. So talking about grades in law school is not something that, but talking about really going off-roading, something like that, and how you like personally things like that. I'm just saying if you saw off-roading pictures or something in the person's office, talking about that is very important. And people like you the best and they feel like they like you, then they're willing to overlook things like not having the best grades or not the best experience. And this is all about being likable. You should study it. There's books. Dale Carnegie's written some How to Win Friends and Influence People. But this stuff is all covered there. These priorities, I hope you took notes, but if you didn't, I think there's an article about this on BCG, but these 5 things are being supportive, performing the job the way the firm wants the work done, contributing positively to the firm's image, and is the person better? Is the person more likable than the other people you're interviewing? That's the webinar. I hope everyone really benefited from this, and because these are very important points. I'm going to take a quick break just for 2 minutes, and then I will come back and answer questions. Just to give you some guidelines or questions. So people like to ask questions. I stay pretty much as long as people have questions on these webinars, but you can ask questions about the webinar, or you can ask questions about your situation or things that are bothering you and what you want to fix in your career. And then I will spend as much time as necessary to answer those. So that those are important questions, I think, that people can ask. So anything that's really on your mind, I'm happy to answer. The other thing is if you are logged into Zoom and you're worried I won't show your name, so I typically cut and paste the questions without showing your name. So everything, of course, is confidential. And I wish we could have calls where people would ask questions with their voice, but attorneys are all, because of the nature of it, you're afraid of talking about a lot of their personal stuff publicly. So I appreciate everyone being on this webinar so far. And I think it's great. I hope everyone learned something. But I'll be back in just a few minutes, and then I will take questions. And so during that time, you may want to ask questions or type them into the Q&A. So just back in just a few minutes. All right, so just a second. I will pull up. No, so just 1 second. Okay, so it looks like we got some questions, which is good. So just give me 1 second here. Okay, so this is the first question. So it's having been in numerous interviews, I've often wondered if there's an optimal number of questions candidate should ask to show genuine interest but not overwhelm the interviewer. What's your perspective on this? So the questions you ask, you should, the biggest piece of advice I can offer about asking questions is you want to really study the firm and the firm you're interviewing with before you go in. In addition to studying the firm, you want to psych yourself up for the firm. You want to find good aspects of it. You want to find ways that you're excited about it, and you almost want to meditate on it. By meditating, you want to think about what are the positive things? What did I like? How do I connect with that? And then that will make questions come up. And then even with your interviewers, you want to go in, and if you know who you're interviewing with before the interview, you want to actually print up their bio pages, look at them, think about how ways you like them or things you think are cool. And so what do you like about the person? And you may not like them, but you have to figure out ways to come across like that. So once you do that, you'll have a good understanding of the kind of questions to ask. You also need to think about your practice area and your experience. And then how does that work with the interviewer? So an example be like maybe you have worked on maybe you're a defense attorney and you do toxic tort defense. So So you think about all the things that you've learned in toxic tort, and maybe you're interviewing with another partner that does toxic tort, and you ask some questions related to what they've done and that are match the kind of things you're interested in. You try to connect with them on that, or you try to connect with them on things about or things you're excited about with the firm, and you try to figure out ways that you can be likable to the firm, things that are in your background and so forth. So this is my perspective. There's not a lot of questions you need to ask. You need to ask questions that are likely to make the firm and the person feel like you like them. And really, I strongly suggest that I've noticed that the best interviewers will often they'll type into Google, they'll try to read news about the firm that's positive. They will try to print up the bios of the people and take notes on the bios while they're reading them about things that they like about the person. And they'll do the same thing with the firm in their practice area. This is what the best people do. So I've noticed when I work with people from the very best firms that look like they have the very best futures, that have had the best backgrounds, this is what they do. They print the bios if they know them. They read news stories. They also read positive things about the firm and just get themselves psyched up. And if you're the most psyched up, then you're going to do the best. And then the questions should flow out of this stuff. And the questions, once you understand that, should flow out of this. And then the questions you do ask are questions that are going to get that are positive, meaning you guys, I saw that you've done these press releases about expanding your mass torts defense practice. That's so great. What do you guys attribute to getting all the work? And are you planning on expanding even more? It's very exciting. I want to be with a firm that's expanding. Or did you who brought in the clients? And if you know the person brought them in, or is it difficult to bring in clients like that? How do you think you're so successful bringing in clients? If you find ways to ask questions about things that the law firm is likely to feel, and the person you're talking with is likely to feel good about themselves and so forth. So that's often one of the most helpful things I can tell you. But you need to ask questions that are positive in nature, that are going to get positive responses. You need to stay away from negative things, and your questions will come out of reading all the news stories, reading the bios, getting psyched up and taking notes about the kind of questions you would want. And then another thing that's pretty cool is when a law firm says, "What kind of questions you have for me?" you say something like, after reading your bio and news, I wonder this positive thing about this positive thing and why. And so you just basically steer things in that level, and that is very helpful. Okay, this is a good question, this person's question. There's often a debate about how personal one should get in professional interviews when it comes to sharing personal stories or experiences that shape our legal journeys. What's the balance law firms look for? Okay, so this is a good question, and you do need to be careful about personal stuff, especially personal stuff that makes you look bad. There's certain things you really want to steer away from. You want to steer away from talking about sickness. I'm sorry to say that, but a lot of people are ill and so forth. And the law firms, it's just, you steer away from that. You steer away from talking about, and this is just in general, about problems you've had. And I'm only bringing this up because some people do this, problems you've had. That would be alcohol, relationships. I'm just giving you an example. I've heard people go in and say they clean, relationships, things along those lines, date, just anything you can think of that's too personal. Marriage, and marriage probably is okay, but you just want to steer away. That's not a problem, or it could be. Yeah, but you could say divorce, or just losing jobs, blaming another, just anything that's real personal to you. You really, that makes you look bad. You always want to avoid The idea is people will always use, this is just important. This is in any type of employment situation, whether you're talking about peers, so superiors and peers will always use negative information against you if you have it. So you need to keep your negative aspects of your personal life away from your employers. And frankly, be careful about even talking to other people. You got to be careful about friendships and firms because this stuff can really hurt you. So personal stories or experience, they need to be related to, some realizations, which means realizations that you're qualified, that you're a good attorney, you grew up a certain way, things like that, a certain way, and motivated you, things that make you look resilient. Resilient meaning you've risen up from problems, and meaning maybe you grew up like a gang member or something. And but those sorts of things, and realizations and motivations, things that are personal, that have made you realize things that make you very interested in the practice area. I worked at a firm once, Dewey Valentine. My grandfather had been good friends with Dewey when he was at University of Michigan, and I brought that up. That was personal. I got a job because of that. There's people that will, personal stories that can be related to, even I was a bad student, and then this thing happened to me. I decided I want to be a lawyer. I know one woman that was very successful. Her father was sued for some sort of trademark case and settled it, and lost. And because of it, he had to file for bankruptcy, and their family lost everything. And so she became a trademark attorney, and really wasn't the best. Didn't go to the best law school, didn't do the best there, but ended up getting a job with probably the best trademark firm in the country, because she went in and told this story about how her family lost everything because they lost a trademark suit. So those sorts of things can be very helpful if you have stories that make it seem like why you're committed to something, what made you like this, and really learning about those questions. One thing I would say about questions for interviews, I have a blog, harrisonbarnes.com. And I've written a lot about interviews on BCG, but also in Harrison Barnes, I've written a lot of interview articles. So if you search for interviews, harrisonbarnes.com or something, you can see those articles. But I've written a lot about it. And a lot of these questions you have to have a really good balance for. And it's a very good question. So yeah, this next question. Okay. Very good question. Let's see here. When I'm discussing my previous cases or experience, to what extent do law firms prefer quantitative results, since the percentage of cases won, over qualitative experiences like the challenges faced? So this is another good question. So the thing about percentages and that sort of thing is, when you start doing that, you get into the position of bragging and talking about things like that. And people are turned off by bragging. These percentages and things are not necessarily that important. If you're an associate and you're not the one that's ultimately responsible for the case, people may feel that's a form of bragging. So you just need to be very careful with that. So just realizing that if you talk about this sort of stuff in interviews, quantitative results could hurt you to some extent. And the percentages, you can certainly bring it up, but you need to be very careful. Qualitative experiences are better, because the biggest reasons that people like people are because of vulnerability makes people like us, right? So if you're vulnerable, then we like people. So we like people that say, here's one of the examples. I heard this very good person talk once. It was Keith Ferrazzi, and he's a interesting guy. And I used to be more in the self-improvement industry, which you may be able to tell because of the stuff I talk about. And I used to work with, anyway, it doesn't matter. But I heard him give a talk. I was in a small group. And in the talk, he said, and Keith went to Princeton, and then I think he got maybe a degree at Wharton or something, and then was the youngest person ever hired at this giant bank or investment bank, and then made partner there within 3 years instead of the normal 8. So he got up and he said, I'm going to tell you about two different people. And I want to tell you, who do you like the best? So the first one is a guy that was first in his high school class. He was captain of the football team in a very competitive school, and he went to Princeton. He not only go to Princeton, but he graduated in 3 years. He was also a member of a very prestigious eating club there, where all these famous people have been. And not only that, but then he went to Wharton Business School. And during the time he was there, he got a job with the most impressive investment bank in the country. He went there. He made partner within 3 years. And by the time he was 28, was making over $1 million a year and just completely on top of the world. So that's the first person he talked about. And the second person he talked about was, I grew up in this small town in West Virginia. My father died when I was 14 from black lung disease. And because he was working in mines, my mother, to put us through school or to support us, worked in a gas station at night as a cashier. And then during the day, she worked as a maid in a hotel. And I managed to, despite all this stuff I was with, when I was young, I used to get beat up. Kids didn't respect me. But I picked myself up. I lifted weights and I became a good football player. And I worked really hard in school and was able to somehow miraculously get into a really good college that I had no business being in. And I also got a scholarship. And I worked as hard as I could. Because I didn't get a full scholarship to the school, I wanted to graduate in 3 years. I wouldn't have to have debt for another year. And then I got a job with a bank and I worked really hard there. I worked harder than other people. Other people were going out and partying at night and things. And I was just so grateful for the position that I committed to the bank for as much as I could. And then I was advanced because of that. And I'm so grateful for the experience and for everything that's been given to me. So obviously, when you talk about people, that when someone talks about themselves one way and not another, you obviously like the second person a lot more because they're telling you about overcoming obstacles and that they've had these mistakes and things have happened. And maybe he talks about mistakes. He talks about he's beat up. Maybe he talks about how he was very good in football, but wasn't able to maybe got a football scholarship. I don't know, but you just make yourself feel vulnerable. And we like people that are vulnerable. Because they make us appreciate them. But if you come across as someone that's trying to brag and look like you're a big deal, that's not the same thing. I'll just tell you this quick story because it's very interesting. I live in Malibu, California, and it's funny, there's all these real estate agents. So there's 200 houses sold in Malibu each year. There's 450 real estate agents. So there's more real estate agents than there are places to sell or rent. And so so all these people are competing. So I was interested in, because this is the role that I'm in, so I'm not like these real estate, but there's certain ones that are more successful than others. There's some houses here that, I don't live anything like it, but they're $70 million or $200 million. And so some of them make an incredible amount of money. My girlfriend knows one of these top real estate agents that sells hundreds of millions of dollars per year. And I met him because I was thinking about doing something with my house, whether it was leasing it or selling it. But again, he's someone that is in a different league, probably than even selling my house. But anyway, he stopped by because he knew her. And all the guy talked about was, when I told him about all these big things he's done, he just talked about how grateful he is, how he's worked so hard, and how he appreciates the people that have helped him so much. And in contrast, the real estate agents that are not as good as him will go out and they'll brag. And this is a guy that makes probably, a lot of money, like $10 million a year, probably selling as a real estate agent. So talking about being vulnerable, talking about how grateful you are, and for your experiences, for people hiring you, for the experience you've had, for the interview, like all this vulnerability, it really goes a long way. And you don't want to look like a loser, but you want to look like you're very excited about the opportunities you've had, like you don't want to look like you're better than others. I met this guy and I was talking to him. He built like this Beverly Hills Hilton hotel. He was very old. He was like in his 80s. He lived in this house that was probably like 30 or $40 million. And then he in Malibu, and then he also had this house in Beverly Hills. It was on the largest lot and had its own lake or something. And just an incredibly successful guy. And I talked to him, and he'd just be like, I'm getting by. I'm doing the best I can. Like, it's so great to be in this country because I grew up in Czechoslovakia or wherever it was. And it wasn't that, but it was some country that he had to flee. And not only that, but I was in the Holocaust, all this kind of stuff. And so everything was about vulnerability. And so this is a lesson that I've learned from a lot of the most successful people and also the best interviewers. They're just very vulnerable. I called this woman this morning that was, again, I had gone to Harvard and was magna cum laude and the Harvard Law Review and then gone to Yale and had been like a summa cum laude or whatever. And just this was at an incredible firm doing very well. And I called her and she was just like, thank you so much for calling me. I'm so happy to hear from you. Thank you for responding so quickly. This is really a great thing. And a lot of times you would call someone like that and they would act all entitled and things, but she was the opposite. And so this is how the most successful people act. It's just, they're always trying to, they always are vulnerable and try to put people at ease. And so talking about, and I'm sorry to just harp on this so much, but bragging, talking about all this stuff almost is a sign to some people of insecurity, inability to connect with them. And so you just have to be very careful about how you approach this. The more vulnerable and this is what the most successful people do. Now, I'm not talking about Trump and people like that, or Mark Cuban or Elon Musk. I'm not talking about people like that, but I'm talking about people that are very successful, working for others, are like this. And so it's just something that's very important to really understand in your search. And just even with clients want to believe that as well. Okay, how would you suggest approaching the subject of lateral movement if I've switched firm multiple times in the past few years without making it seem like a red flag? Okay, so that's a good question. People that switch firms a lot really can get ahead. There's nothing wrong with switching firms, but what law firms want to see when they interview you is they want to see, it's almost, they talk about Horatio Alger stories. And so what a Horatio Alger is just advancing and picking yourself up or whatever. I don't know, but I'll just use that story, and advancing and continuing to improve and bringing yourself up from nothing to something. So if you're talking about moving firms a lot, you need to position it as some sort of something like positioned as everything you've done leads to this firm. So meaning everything you've done leads to this firm. So it means you have to talk about better and better opportunities to realize your objectives. So maybe you want to, and the idea would be maybe you start out doing insurance defense, but you really want to do commercial litigation. And so you move to one firm that does commercial litigation, does maybe insurance defense and, sorry, I'm just giving you this example, does insurance defense and litigation and commercial litigation, but you're still doing insurance defense. You're still doing insurance defense and some litigation. And then the next move, maybe it's defense. And then the next one is maybe commercial litigation for smaller clients. Sorry. Smaller clients. And then the next one would be, then maybe this is next move, one you're interviewing with, would be commercial litigation for large clients. So it's something like that. And the idea is you're moving to get closer and closer to your goal. And so this is the ultimate way to do it, if you can. And so you can position it that way. Sometimes you can position it as just moving from smaller clients to larger clients, or moving from a firm where they don't make any partners to one where you can be partners, moving locations because of different things. But the idea is, what are we doing? Commercial? I don't know, whatever. But you need to position everything as that you're moving firms and you're moving places because there's some sort of upward mobility. People respect upward mobility. Different places like France and stuff, if you're born into a certain family and have a certain, it's very hard to advance. But in Horatio Alger type story, which Americans really love, is we love people that are moving and trying to improve themselves. So if you're asked about the moves, then this is how you do it. Now, one thing I will say is if a firm is interviewing you, they're not going to probably bring it up very much. They may be curious and may bring it up a little bit, but they don't want to bring it up. They already realize that you've moved a lot. They're still willing to interview you. So it's not something you should spend a lot of time on, but you definitely don't want to portray weakness. Now, I'm going to go a little off track here and talk for everyone on the call about weakness and showing that. So what lawyers don't like it when other lawyers show weakness. It's when they're interviewing them. It's in the DNA of what it means to be a lawyer. So lawyers are expected you could have a client that chops someone's head off with an axe on camera, and the lawyer still is expected to go and defend them and not talk about negative things and so forth. So your job as an attorney is always to portray things that are positive and downplay things that are negative. And the most important person you do that with is yourself. So if a lawyer is not sticking up for their client, portraying negative aspects of their client, we don't like that. We don't like that attorney. And that attorney would be considered weak. And there are attorneys like that are weak, that don't stick up for their clients. And those attorneys don't have a lot of business and they don't do well. They don't stay around in law firms. So you cannot portray weakness for your client and you cannot portray weakness for yourself. I remember when I was in a big firm, there was an attorney and I was shocked. It was a very good attorney, but he was a partner, but he did not last long in the law firm. And I knew he wouldn't after he did this. He had this client. It was a big client. The client was spending incredible amounts of money at the law firm, and it was actually his client. And then I was in the hall one day and with a couple of other associates, and we were discussing the client. And he basically was saying what a scumbag the client was, how he didn't approve of him, like how he was bad at this and bad at that. And I was shocked. I was like, why would this guy be talking so negatively about his client? And soon enough, he lost the client, and because he probably showed the client that he didn't think highly of them. So you can't talk negatively. You have to take your client's side. You also have to take your side. So if you start talking about negative things about your lateral movement, I wasn't getting good feedback. I had problems with assignments. I didn't trust people. Then you start looking like you have weaknesses. So you need to position everything and your interviews in a way that makes it look like you're doing a better job. And someone asked if you can share those slides later. Yes, they will go. This webinar, by the way, will be not the Q&A. Those will go up separately, but the webinar will be online, and I believe on BCG, and then the slides should also be uploaded as well, so you can be able to see that. Okay, this person asked a question. Their name is displayed, so I'm not going to show their name. Given that firms want to see that you will support them and not that you expect them to support you, is it a red flag to talk about mentorship or training opportunities in the interview? Or could that be a sign that you intend to stay there, or be seen as a sign that you intend to stay there and want to grow there? This is an important statement you're making. You're saying, you will support them and not their expectation that we will support you. So the idea is, this is just how it works. If you support the firm will support you back. So there's a very interesting quote. I don't know if I made it up or I don't remember, but it's something that I'm sure I didn't make it up. But the quote is, life supports what supports life. Businesses grow based on their ability to support other people and make lives better. People become powerful, anything when they're supporting others. So right now I'm trying to support you. It doesn't mean I'm become powerful, but it means that I'm supporting you, and that's important for you. People need to be supported. And so life supports what supports life. So if you are helping and bringing other people up, then those people will support you. This is what charismatic religious people do in religions. This is what good business people do. This is what, if you have a garden and you're trying to grow a crop, if you water the crop and take care of it, it's going to grow and support you. If you're raising animals to eat, all these sorts of things, life supports what supports life. If you have your significant other and you're helping support them, they're going to support you, hopefully. And so this is just a general rule. It's one of the most important rules actually for life and careers. And when I hear about partners bringing in lots of business, and typically they'll be seen as a client by the client as someone that really supports them and helps protects them and keeps them in business and gets them out of trouble. So all this stuff is very important. You need to be seen as someone that's going to support others, and it's just very important that way. So life supports what supports life. If you support the firm, then the firm will support you. I can think of so many examples. I remember there was in my first firm, there was Quinn Emanuel, there was a guy that was up for partner, and he didn't make partner, but he was working very hard. So a lot of people, when they wouldn't make partner, would be angry. They would leave the firm. They would, give people bad vibes, all these sorts of things. So instead of doing that, he decided that he was billing like 3,000 hours a year, that he was going to work even harder and dedicate himself even harder. Now, the firm typically would make partners once a year. I don't know if it was in September or whenever it was, but it's something like that, maybe September. And we would have this partnership meeting where they would decide who's going to partner. Instead of getting mad and so forth, he decided he was going to help the firm even more and bill even more hours. So in October, he billed 400 hours. In November, he billed 400 hours. In December, he billed 400 hours. And then they were like, this is insane. Like, he's on track to bill almost 5,000 hours a year. This is how he's reacted to not making partner. And so they called a special meeting where they've never done that before, and they made him partner. So the idea is that the more you support, and I'm not suggesting anybody work those kind of hours, but the more you see him as someone that's going to support others, life supports life. If you're giving of yourself, if you're bringing in business, if you're doing all these things to support your firm, then the firm will support you. And so it's just very important to approach things that way. Okay. In what ways can lateral hires demonstrate their interest in a new firm is motivated by alignment with the firm's mission rather than external factors like higher pay and higher balance? So you don't talk about pay. You talk about things that you like about the firm, and you don't even have to say things you like about the firm. If you're interviewing for something in a practice area, and you talk about how you like your practice area and how you do this and you do that, and so you try to be as supportive. You try to make sure that the firm understands how much you like this, and how you're excited to go someplace that does more of the type of work that you want to do. How all these sorts of things. And the more you talk about that, the more the firm's going to like you. So you need to make sure that you're talking about those things rather than other things that may not that may make the firm think you're just there for higher pay or work-life balance. You need to come across as having enthusiasm for the work, making the firm think that they're moving there because it's a better fit, coming up with reasons that the law firm is someplace where you can achieve your goals. These are all good questions too, by the way. Thank you. And this is honestly one of the favorite times of week, because I think it's a good chance to help people that may not know these things. And so it's very useful. Okay, does the timeline between the final interview and hiring decision often indicate the firm's level of interest in the candidate? For instance, should I be concerned that I haven't heard back from them in a week? Okay, so this is a good question. People do screening interviews and they don't hear anything for a few weeks. People will do a final interview and weeks could go by before the firm notifies them if there's an offer or not. And so why is that? That's a good question. So one of the reasons is that the partners people may not return in the reviews. They may be thinking about it. They may just be disorganized. They may have a hard time getting people's schedules to line up. You just don't know. So that's one thing. The next thing is that many times a law firm will be interviewing multiple people for the job. So they may bring in 4 or 5 people for second rounds or even more. and they're trying to decide. Or they may have people scheduled. Maybe you interview on October 15th, and then someone else is scheduled to interview for a second round on October 30th. And then maybe a good candidate comes along in the interim that even looks better on paper than you. So they decide they want to interview that person. So not all law firms will make decisions right away. Sometimes they're interviewing multiple people. Sometimes they may do a second round interview with you. They may do a second round interview with someone a few days later. They may make that person offer a week later, but they're still keeping you warm, because if that person doesn't accept the offer, they'll make you the offer. So you just don't know. It's nothing to worry about. Sometimes, a lot of times what happens is they're interviewing you because they think they're going to get this big matter coming in that'll take a lot of work, would be a lot of work for you. And instead of the matter coming in that doesn't, and because it doesn't materialize, you are unable to, that they're not interested in hiring you, but maybe they're going to wait. So there's just so much that goes on. But I would say that one of the things that I would just stress is that this just happens a lot. Sometimes firms will ghost you. Sometimes you'll go on I've had instances where I've seen people go on a second round interview and the firm just never responds, just nothing. So I know it's important to you, but the reason you don't want to make a big deal about this, and this is an important point, and I hope this is another point that I think could change your interviewing and stuff if you're not doing it. There's the idea of being in demand. Law firms love it when you look like you're in demand. So what does that mean? That means that, sorry, I'm just writing this down. So what does it mean? So if you go out on a date with someone and I don't know, and you're expecting, however the dynamic is with this person, maybe they're expecting you to call them and sort of them calling you. And so I'm not going to get into this male-female type stuff. But if someone's waiting for someone to call them and the person doesn't call after a first date, then that's it. So there's not really, there's no reason to follow up and say, why didn't you call me? You just can't do that. It doesn't work. I remember once I met this woman. It's a funny story. I met this woman at a party, and I really liked her, but I don't know. She was friends with someone that worked for me, and it was her ex-boyfriend, I think. And so I was like, I can't get involved in this. But anyway, but I thought maybe this guy was moving out of town or something and quitting his job. I thought maybe I'll talk to her after this. But in the interim, I was in my house one night and going to bed, and she was standing outside my window, and I was like, what the hell? And that scared me. So obviously that was not something I was interested in anymore. Not obviously, but the thing is, I just closed the shades and went to bed. But the point here is that if you seem desperate, if you seem like you don't have other opportunities, if you seem like you're not in demand, then that's just a turnoff. People are going to be turned off. So if the firm thinks that the firm is in control, either they call you back to get together or they don't. And so you can't really worry about it. Another thing people do is they're like, oh, I have this other offer. Sometimes that works and I need to decide, and that's something. But one of the things that I'm really good at in recruiting is I'm really good at making sometimes the law firms feel like they're in demand and they're really hard to get into. And candidates, making them feel like the law firm's really hard to get into, or the law firm's really hard to get into, and the law firm feeling like it's very important not to have a certain type of person, and this person's really rare in the market. So when people think that, they're much more likely to be interested. So you have to make yourself feel in demand. You have to make people think that you're interviewing with this firm, or maybe you have all these other firms that want to interview you, but you're more interested in this interview. And you have to feel like you're in demand. Just like you would approach, you have to appear desirable, and you can't appear desperate, because if you appear desperate, the law firm is going to be like, wait a minute, why is this person desperate? And so you just have to be very careful with that. And it's just, I hate to bring it up in that way, but you don't want people to feel like you're desperate. You need to feel like in demand, because the more in demand you make yourself feel, the more in demand seem to people, the more likely they are to be interested in you. So being in demand makes them interested in you. I've got a lot of examples of this, but when in relationships, if someone that you're interested in a relationship with, you realize that all these other people are interested in them, suddenly you're more interested in them. And that's just how it works. So if you are interested in dating someone and all these other people are trying to date the same person and the person chooses you, then that person's more attractive for whatever reason. So that's just how people think. And think about your own relationships. Think about, this is how attorneys recruit. They want to feel like the person they're hiring is in demand. They got a good person. Okay, so how, in an era of increasing AI and automation, how are law firms weighing traditional legal skills against technological proficiency during the hiring process? Should I, as an attorney, place more emphasis on showcasing my adaptability to new technologies? I don't think that's that important. But again, I'm not an expert in AI. I certainly use it to some extent. But I think that people bring it up, you can talk about it with enthusiasm and how it can be used. But say I'm willing to work in the way anybody wants me to work. People will often talk about it in interviews where they're writing briefs and stuff with it, and how that, I don't know, how cites wrong cases or cases don't exist and so forth. But what I would recommend is just, if it comes up, bring it up. But a lot of times partners won't like it because people are used to doing things in a traditional way. And if you want to do things in a different way, then that may be threatening to them. And so you need to talk about it to the extent people bring it up. And if they do bring it up, you need to be prepared to talk about it. So you should understand it, and you need to have a level of enthusiasm and talk about how it can get better results. But you don't want to show up people that may not understand about it. So younger people often will have different skills than older people, but older people a lot of times will value those skills. But you have to be careful because a lot of times they feel like what they're doing is the right way to do things. I'll just tell you a funny story. When I started recruiting, which was a long time ago, but it's 24 or 5 years ago, there were no articles or anything on recruiter websites. They just had these websites, and they just talked about how great they were. And then I started putting on articles and advertising the internet and doing all these things. And the difference between what I was doing and other recruiters were doing was like night and day. And I started using all these new technologies and databases. And I couldn't, with older attorneys, the older recruiters, they were used to calling, cold calling, working on one job at a time, all this sorts of stuff. And that honestly is something that no longer was working. And I was able to become very successful doing new things. So I think, and start this firm because no one else was doing this at the moment. I'm not saying there's anything special what I'm doing about now, but I saw the market in a different way. It's the same thing for you to understand with AI, is that's very powerful. It's a game changer. But if you're interviewing with older people that may not understand that, you need to be very careful about showing them up, about talking about things they don't like, about acting overly confident. Let's say, I'm learning about this and this, but not making them feel stupid, because I think it's that powerful that if a young attorney is talking to an older attorney and understands that you can make the person feel stupid and not necessarily like you. It's very important. There's some more questions. Okay, let me see here. These are good questions. I like these questions where there's a lot of words and thought. Let's go. Okay, I recently decided to withdraw an application from a slightly more prestigious firm that I interviewed after a very short time in my current firm. They started off very interested, but things cooled, and it was a few weeks before I heard back. I'm also doing extremely well in my current firm in terms of the people I'm working with and overall volume level of work for my class here. Did I make a mistake and burn a bridge? For a future employer, is it the right move to stay put? Okay, so I recommend, I'm a recruiter, but I recommend just a slightly more prestigious firm isn't that big of a deal. I would not have withdrawn my application. I would have tried to get an offer. And then when you got the offer, I would maybe not take it. Or if you didn't get the offer, then ask if you can come back and apply again. That would have been how I would have handled it. When you withdraw an application, it just sends that's just not what people always do. It's okay, but it almost makes it look like you're scared that you might not have gotten an offer. So I wouldn't have done that, but it doesn't mean anything. Law firms have short memories. So if you were to apply in 2 or 3 years, there might be completely different people there. So it's not something you really need to worry about. But this is just very good, your question. I think it's always better to stay at your current firm if you're doing well, because what that does is if you are doing well and compared to others, because law firms, it's just, again, I'm in the business of moving people, but I just want to be completely straight with you that if you are able to stay at your current employer, the longer you do that, actually, the more marketable you're going to be in the long run. Someone that stays at their firm 5 years and doesn't move looks like they're loyal. It looks like you're going to stick around. It looks like you can be trusted. It looks like you can get along with people. So people will leave for all sorts of reasons. I'll just give myself as an example. If I can work in law firms and I can do good work, but I'm more like entrepreneurial minded. I would be a very bad hire. I would stay in a place like a year or two, and then I would think about going to another place, and that's not good. A law firm shouldn't hire people like that. I wouldn't. And staying put in a place means you're committed to the practice, like you're willing to learn, like you can be trusted with clients, all these sorts of things. And if you do move, maybe when you move to a much more prestigious firm, but not maybe, or a place you can get different types of work. But keep in mind, if you move, you're starting from ground zero. You're starting from ground zero in terms of your relationships. You're starting from ground zero in terms of establishing trust. You're starting from ground zero in terms of being able to do the type of work that the firm does and knowing how to work with different people and learning about clients and being trusted. So many times, I'm just being honest with you, you're much better off staying at a firm if you're doing well. There's no reason to move, not even for a little more prestigious firm. And you're also people that make partner and so forth. The firm loves people that are loyal and stick around, and you'll have more security at your current firm if you stay around. So there's so many reasons to stay at a firm if you're doing well. Now, if you can move to a much more prestigious firm and there's more opportunity and more income, then yeah, why not? But you have to be careful. Like, what are my future opportunities going to look like if I move firms? Because that's not really always then your best option. Like, I would just be very careful many times about leaving your firm. So I say that because I think this is just my opinion, but I think I'm right. The attorneys that are happiest practicing law and the ones that do the best practicing law often are the ones that are the most stable. So it's just how it is. You stick with a group of people that they become your tribe. You understand them, they understand you, and everything just comes together and you do really well. I really recommend for everyone, if you can, staying with your current firm really as long as you can if you're doing okay. Now, if there's an incredible opportunity where your salary is going to be doubled and there's more or increased by 50%, and you want that firm for different reasons, then it's okay to move. Like, there's certain things that are good for moving. For example, if you want to be in-house and you 100% know that's what you want, and you can get a job at a much more prestigious firm, that's going to make it easier for you to go in-house, because in-house companies, the best ones, hire people from the biggest firms because they're the ones they use for the work, and then they feel like they're getting a better deal. But you just need to just be very careful about that. So I've written articles about staying with your current firm. I would review those. Okay, I work for some partners who clearly taken a liking to me and had a lot of influence in my firm. One is difficult. He does not know the standard review for dispositive motions. They are also very adamant. They're correct and very sensitive. They often rewrite motions to include personal attacks against the other side, which once led to sanctions. I want to help this person stay in their graces. What can I do to fix them? So this is a simple question. You need to take their side. That's it. You need to take their side. They need to feel you have their back, and you don't want to criticize them, make them feel criticized, and so forth. You just need to be very careful about all that. You just can't do it. You have to be very careful. Criticized. So you just need to be very careful about that. So that's pretty much the answer. You just can't make people feel stupid. If you do, then you're in trouble. So I was once at this firm, and I shouldn't say, but I'm not bragging here, but I'm pretty decent when it comes to motions. I write very well. I don't necessarily write very well at everything. I'm not a perfect writer, but with motions, I used to be very good at them, and it's just something I took to. So I was hired by this firm to basically work with a partner that was very well known as a good litigator, but literally couldn't work. Couldn't write. He would write sentences and he would just leave obvious words out so they wouldn't be complete. And then he couldn't effectively put his thoughts on paper. But when it came to talking in person, and he was incredible. So he was a very good attorney. Like he literally, I don't think ever had lost a case. He may be having a judgment against his client. He'd settled things, but never lost a case. But I would never in a million years bring up that he wasn't a good writer. I wouldn't tell people that. I wouldn't tell a secretary that. I wouldn't make him think that. I wouldn't mark up his work in a way that would show all that. I would just do it in a way that I would make the corrections, but I wouldn't even tell him I was making the corrections. Then he would read it and see how good it was. And if he wrote something, the idea is there's going to be partners that you always work with that aren't necessarily good at things. Like they have blind spots. And so you cannot bring that to their attention. You just have to support them and fix their problems and that's it. You don't want to make people feel insecure, and different people have different levels of insecurity. So you just need to be really on top of all that and do what you can to not to not bring that to their attention and to not criticize people. If you make people feel good, I once had this partner that I worked with that was just like you were talking about. He was incredibly caustic and to the other sides, and was really good at fighting with opposing counsel and undermining them. And I just really loved it. And so people would work with him and just be like disgusted with it. And then he wouldn't like them back and wouldn't give them work and wouldn't support them. And then I worked with him and I just basically told him how cool he was, how funny this stuff was. And he loved me. And literally it's been 4 years since I worked in the law, or 26 or whatever, since I worked in this law firm. And the guy sends me Christmas cards with a 1-page write-up about his family and what they did every year. Every year, he loved that I took his side, and when other people didn't. So you can't be upset about this. You have to support the partners. You have to not take the side of others that are against them, and just be very neutral. And to the extent you say things, don't say anything negative. I'm in this business group. I'm like president of it or chair, whatever. And I had to pick the person to be the chair for the next year. And after picking them, the person did a lot of stuff that I thought was maybe not. Again, I'm not necessarily right about it. And they didn't do anything illegal or anything. There were certain events and things that they were in charge of that didn't go off. And so I told a couple senior people about this that were outside the group and advising us. And they literally just didn't say anything. They were just not taking sides. They were just neutral. They told stories and things, but they didn't take sides. And those are very smart. You just don't get involved in a lot of this stuff. You don't take sides. You don't want to come across as someone that does that. And if you do that, you're going to be much better off than people that don't do that. And it's just very helpful to never take sides in any dispute. Don't take sides in anything. If anything, make the people feel supported and don't get involved in politics. I was talking to this one firm. I went into this firm once for an interview. I'd only been practicing for 6 months and I shouldn't have gone in the interview, but it was like an entertainment law firm in LA. And these guys were representing all these movie stars and studios and stuff. And I had a friend that worked there and I was like, oh, this sounds totally cool. And so I went into the interview and it went well, the first couple of people I interviewed with. But then I got into this one interview and this partner was just incredibly caustic, like just really mean. Like he was just saying these things that were like, basically, you're a loser for interviewing with me 6 months. Why would you betray your firm? And I was like, wow, this guy's freaking a maniac. Like, I just really hate him. And so after that interview, I went into another interview with some associates and I was like, I just got to go. I'm out of here. Like I didn't like the firm and decided that after that person being treated, it was just horrible. Some of the stuff he was saying, like, I was shocked. And I went home. I was like so upset, like even at the end of the day. that I got on my couch. And I think dogs like can sense when you're really upset with something. And my dog came up, who wasn't that friendly of a dog, and kept kissing me and cuddling. And it was just, I was that shocked by this interview. But anyway, so then I kept in touch with my friend. And then like a couple of years later, he said, that guy's been fired, and a whole group of other attorneys left because they got on the wrong side of some issue. I don't know if he got, and so he went from being like one of the most powerful partners in the firm to on the outs. And what does that mean? It just means that if you get involved in different things and you get involved in different groups and you're seen as on one side of an issue in terms of another side of an issue, then you're in trouble. So don't, to the extent you can get around it, you don't want to play these political games and be on people's side, because you don't want people disliking you. You need to be like Switzerland and in the middle of things. So you can support different partners, but you don't want to be on the side of one group against another. You just need to avoid it. And yeah. Okay. Can you briefly discuss how interviewing a new firm for a partner position as a senior associate for a partner position? Okay. I'm assuming this means interviewing for a partner position as interviewing for a new firm for an associate position. Okay, so when you're interviewing for partner position, partner positions are actually much easier. Now, there's some firms like Gibson Dunn where you have to be liked by all the partners and you interview tons of them to become a partner. But a partner position is essentially, it's about, depending on the firm, but in most cases you have to have business. It's essentially about the amount of business you have and how much of your collections, I'm just being very direct here, you are willing to give the firm. So what does that mean? So this is the basics of it. It's a lot more than that. It's about fit and stuff, but it's really about money in a lot of cases. So if you have, this is just how it works. This is a high number. If you have 5 million in business, some firms will pay you, some firms may pay you 1.5 million. Others might pay you $1 million, all that sort of thing. So it differs. And so this is a lot of what it's about. It's not always about this, but that's a lot of what it's about. Or if you don't have business, it's about your future ability to get business. Now, these are for kind of equity type roles. Or it's about if you're interviewing as for a partner that's like an income partner, would be more about your ability to do this certain type of work and maybe bring in business later. So this is really what kind of the partner roles are about. It's more about the firm has power. They want to know how much of your business you have, how much to share, the level of support you need, all this sorts of stuff. So they're basically interviewing you and asking, can they make money off you? And you're asking, can I make money off that? And then how willing you are to share resources, to bring people in, to bring clients, and then how much they trust that. Okay, so that's what they're looking for in partners. They're also looking for, sometimes you may be interviewing for a partner position where the firm already has work. So then they're interested in sort of your ability of how you fit in and that sort of thing. But the partners are basically about that. And if you're interviewing for an associate position, it's just a little bit different. Partners are expected to, for the most part, have business, share that business with the firm, and agree on a fair split in terms of the amount of money they bring in, or their future ability to bring in business and what it looks like. For an associate position, they're basically, so this is one of the ways to think about this, and I think it's the most important, is when you're interviewing for a partner position, if you're basically interviewing to be a general. So general means control. It's just a different thing. It's supervising the associates, bringing in work, all that sort of thing. So you're interviewing to be a general. And then if you're interviewing for an associate position, you're really interviewing to be a soldier with potential. What does that mean? It means you follow orders, you follow orders, you do what's asked of you, do what's asked, and all that sort of thing. But one of the other things I would just bring up that's important even for generals. So generals, attorneys in law firms that have business, they're ultimately they're still team players at the best firms. Now, there are some firms that are very siloed and where people are doing a bunch of different things. They're still team players. And really that play the game, that do what their superiors want. So sometimes like, for example, a law firm may tell a partner, we're going to pay you, as long as you bring in 5 million, we'll pay you 1.5 million a year. And then maybe it gets really slow one year and they say, we can only pay you $1 million this year, but we'll make it up to you in a few years when things do better. And then the partner will say, yes, no problem. But a lot of other people would say, hey, that sucks, I'm leaving. So you're still expected to be a team player as a partner, and partners want to see you do that. Law firms want to see you do that. Law firms also want to get a sense that you'll share work, that you won't be empty work, a sense that you'll get along with others, and a sense that you won't leave. With others, and sense you won't leave. Sense you will not leave. And so all these kind of positive things that you'll support them. And it's actually much harder to be a partner than it is to be an associate. A lot of partners will tell you, hey, I really miss being a partner. I really miss being an associate. So basically, a soldier has potential, follows orders, do what's asked. And then it depends if you're a junior to senior. But if you're an associate and you're interviewing with other associates, you typically, you don't want them to feel threatened. So associates interviewing with other associates have to be very careful about, interviewing with other associates, let me just write that down. Other associates need to be very careful about trying to be threatening. So you don't want to be threatening to other associates. So you need to basically, when you're interviewing with other associates, you need to be seen like, someone that gets along, will not upstage others, not a threat. So not a threat to other associates. So this is very important. So associates won't like you if you interview with associates and you appear like you're better than them, or you're gonna do things differently. Now, associates interviewing with partners, then when you do that, then you need to brag, and not brag, but talk about how hard you're going to work and how, you're willing, just things that would impress other partners so the partners can feel like that. So these are the general rules of interviewing. I think you said something also about senior associate, from interviewing with new firm associates. Yeah, so that I think I've answered that. If you have a follow-up question, I'm happy to answer this. It's a good question, but partners interviewing with partners, it's really about your business, your ability to future get business, your ability to share the business with a firm, your ability to, if the firm wants to rip you off one year, how malleable you see, not rip you off, but not honor prompt, how malleable is seen with that, and then how much you can help the firm. And then associates, really your ability to be a soldier, do what's asked of you. And then you have the different types of partners. And so you have people interviewing with other associates. I mean, you don't want to look threatening. And then if you're interviewing partners, then this is where you pull everything out and talk about how hard you're going to work and aggressive you are and all that. You have to interview differently with partners than as an associate. You brought up a senior associate, and I'll just deal with that a little bit. So senior associate, there's different types of senior associates that are hired. Sometimes a law firm will hire a senior associate because they just have a lot of work and they don't want the person to stick around very often, which really is something that happens a lot. Other times they'll hire a senior associate because a partner left, but the firm has a lot of institutional work. Other times they'll hire a senior associate. The senior associates often bill at rates that are similar to partners. So it becomes very difficult for them to get work because partners typically will keep a percentage of the work that they do that's high. And then it's a lower percentage that they get for work that they have others do. So senior associates need to be very dedicated, but they also need to appear, and I hate to say this, but they need to appear they'll be okay with it. If they don't make partner, the firm asks them to leave, because this is what happens a lot is law firms hire senior associates and then they only keep them on for a couple of years and then they just get rid of them. It's sad, but it happens. But if I was a senior associate interviewing with a firm, it's not a good idea to walk into one of the world's biggest law firms as a senior associate, because your odds of making partner are very slim and they're probably just going to use you for a short time. They may make you counsel and stuff, but it becomes very difficult. So that's just kind of some rules with senior associates. But the final thing is the senior associate needs to appear hungry. They typically will have a lot of client contacts. They need to appear good with clients. And then they need to will work a lot of hours. And then you need to figure out when you go into interview as a senior associate, is this a partnership role, or is it short term? And if it's short term, which it probably is, then you basically need to say that I'll work as hard as I can as long as you have me in that sort of thing. So these are just some general rules. I'm sorry for giving you so much detail about that, but I wanted to make sure that you understood this as well as I could. Okay, let's see here. This is another question. Person used their name, so I'm just reputation. Okay, cannabis. So cannabis clients are weird. It was a really good practice area for a while, and now it's petered out. There's a lot less working for alcohol used to be like considered like a horrible thing. And there was actually prohibition. And now there's tons of big law firms that do alcohol practice areas. And cannabis is something I grew up with thinking it was like this horrible thing. People that smoked it were stoners and not to be trusted and all this stuff, but maybe not to be trusted, but not worthy of a lot of respect. And it's just, I don't think it's really that way anymore. I think cannabis is even at the highest levels, is very respected. People really don't care about it like they used to. Even Elon Musk smoking on Joe Rogan, it's funny, but I don't think people really think about it in the way they used to. I don't think working for a law firm that does cannabis is really going to hurt you anymore. I think it would have in the past, but honestly, I think things have changed so much that no one really cares. It's just a different world than it used to be. And I wouldn't worry about it. But what I would worry about is if the law firm is overly dependent on it, because I've seen that it's just the cannabis is not really what people thought it was going to be. I think a couple of years ago, they thought it was going to be something 5 years ago in California and so forth, major thing. It is a big thing because you have it legal in New York, obviously Colorado, and in all over California. It's obviously a booming Michigan. It's obviously a booming thing to some extent, but it's not anywhere near what people thought it was going to be. And I don't think there's a lot of people are really that nervous anymore about cannabis. I think that it used to be that way, but I don't think it's that way. I will tell you, I was interviewing an attorney from this law firm in Albany, New York, I think, and he was looking for a job. And his firm did nothing but porno, like representing porno makers. And I think that would maybe taint a little bit, even though that's acceptable too. But cannabis is not the same thing. And I don't think you have to worry about that. Okay, so you're absolutely right. There's some firms where there are people that have a very cold demeanor, not welcoming. I've experienced several of those. I remember I interviewed with a big firm in downtown Los Angeles years ago when I was still an attorney. And for some reason, I went in and interviewed with the labor and employment. I was interviewing with labor and employment partner. I wasn't looking for a labor and employment job. And he was just as cold and not welcoming and unpleasant as they could be. So much so that after that interview, I completely lost interest in working at that firm, even though I interviewed with a couple of people later. But I don't know if I got a job there or not. They called me back for extra interviews, but he was awful, just very cold, not welcoming, suspicious, he just took a look at me and we were just completely incompatible. But one thing that was interesting to me is after that, my best friend went to work at that law firm and was there for 6 or 7 years. And he said that this guy was so awful that he basically would rotate. People would go there to work in the labor and employment department, and he would rotate them pretty much every year. All these people would go there and quit or get fired working for this guy. So I would be very cautious going to work in some place where someone like that is there. And if someone is cold and unwelcoming, that's also not a good sign. The people you're working with should like you. I had another friend that worked at a law firm, and he got a series of LLMs. He'd gone to a law school in California called Thomas Jefferson. I don't think it's even around anymore, but it was unaccredited. But you can still in California take the bar if you're going to an unaccredited law school. But you can do that in California. I think you can do it in New York. And then after that, to look more. And the reason he was very intelligent, I think he was just dyslexic and couldn't I don't think couldn't take the LSAT or get a good score on it. So that's what happened with that. But still very smart. And he ended up getting several LLMs. And then this final one was at Harvard. And then somehow he got a job at the Los Angeles office of a big New York law firm. And I don't know how he got the job, but when he got there, everybody was just very cold, not nice to him, not giving him work. And the poor guy almost had a nervous breakdown because he just felt horrible. And then he went to another big firm in LA that was an LA-based firm, kind of mid-sized, and his career took off, and he got the highest bonuses and brought in clients. But the point is, when you interview with a firm where people are cold and not welcoming, I would stay away from there. And there's a reason they're like that. There's a reason if the law firm keeping them there, then that's the law firm's personality, and they don't care. So I would stay away from firms like that. The other thing is that when you walk into a firm, like every firm has different kind of vibes. And so if you walk into a firm that has a certain type of person in it, or where you don't feel comfortable, then you should stay away. You can walk into houses and where people live and feel different vibes. There's just different vibes that go around. I remember, this is a funny story. I don't know why I'm going off track so much, but I have had people working for me in offices in India, or an office in India since I think. But at one point there was a very important guy in India, and he knew that I wasn't close with him, but he had a friend coming that was from this head of this religion, like a branch of the religion, but with thousands of followers in the city he was in, wanted to come to Los Angeles and stay with me with his wife for a couple of weeks I don't know what the reason was, because he was, I don't know, but he wanted to stay with me for a couple of weeks. And then he was going to go give these giant presentations all around Los Angeles to these followers or something. But anyway, he stayed in this room of my house, and very religious man. He'd get up and with his wife, and they would do this type of breathing exercise and yoga for 4 or 5 hours a day. And anyway, so when he left, there was like this energy in the room. It was very positive, and it was almost like meditative. And I can't explain it, but my wife felt it, and other people that went in so different things give different energies to the atmospheres you're in. And I'm not big on supernatural type things, but you can feel different energies when you walk into different firms. Sometimes they feel welcoming, sometimes they don't. And sometimes that's just personal to you. So you want to go and you want to be in places where the energy feels right. And if it doesn't, you're going to have a hard time. It's just what it is. And there's this thing by Malcolm Gladwell that people form impressions of things within the first several seconds of even instantly. And it's the same thing that happens in all that happens in law firms too. So I would be very careful if things seem to rub you negatively. And if you walk in and it feels comfortable, you're going to do well. If it doesn't, you shouldn't work there. Okay, when do you offer a resume workshop? May I attend? So the resume workshop I do one for my candidates, which is every Tuesday, I think at 3 p.m. Pacific time. So if I'm working with you at BCG, like people will send their resumes in advance. I don't have the URL for it right now, but if you're a candidate, you'll get it. The other thing we do too is I do quarterly resume workshops. So now it's the first quarter would have been in January, February, March, and then March, April, May, and then June, July, August. Yeah. So the next resume workshop, I think, will be happening maybe even next week. So I don't know, but you'll get a notification about it. And then on the resume workshop, anybody that submits a resume, I'll review it on the call, which is a lot of fun. Sometimes these calls go like 4 or 5 hours, but I can review your resume. And it's always useful to get input on your resume. It can help you quite a bit. And I love going over resumes in the resume workshop. It's a lot of fun. You can always make a lot of really good improvements for people. So that'll probably be, I think, next week or the week after, because I do it quarterly. Okay. So if you get fired or leave on bad terms, that's okay. Most attorneys get fired or have to leave a job under bad circumstances at some point in their career. It's just learning lessons and that sort of thing. The firms, if they check your resume, there's kind of 2 types of checks. So sometimes, and this is what you need to be careful of, but it doesn't always work. Sometimes law firms will know people at another firm. And so if you're not working or you're at the current firm, they'll maybe call them up and say, hey, what do you think about this person? If you're not currently working there and you're not working at all, then they may do that. And does it happen a lot? No, probably 15, 20% of the time. But if they call up and they just check your references, the firm's just going to confirm your time there, and that's it. One thing I've noticed that's interesting, this is just talking about references, is the best firms will generally give glowing references to people almost regardless of how they did there. I've seen cases where I had one case where a woman was at a big firm for 6 months and then was institutionalized for a couple other months for some psychiatric disorder. I called the firm for a reference, and because I wanted to see how she would do, or I don't know why I called. Maybe she asked me to, and they gave the most glowing reference you can imagine. It was, it was a big firm. I don't want to say the name, but it was a big New York law firm. And I've noticed this time and time again. With the best firms, will always give great reviews. The ones that don't are often smaller firms or firms that with people are, I don't know, it's just, you have to be careful with those. But the best firms, it's almost always good references. Now, sometimes if you did something bad, they will follow you if you had some major problems or something, or they talk to other people. I had this one instance where there was this law firm in Wisconsin, and they hired one of my candidates, and for an important job, he was making quite a bit of money for Wisconsin. And then the guy was there for a week or two, and then the law firm just fired him. And I was like, what the hell happened? And they said, he didn't tell us everything about his history. And I was like, what does that mean? Does he have a criminal record or anything? And they're like, no, he just didn't tell us stuff. So I don't know what happened or why they did that. They wouldn't tell me. But after that happened, I just basically was like, okay, this is sometimes happens. There's nothing wrong with leaving the firm on bad terms. The only thing I would recommend is if that happens, what you should do is you want to not talk about it a lot. Law firms will, when they bring you in to interview you, they're not going to go into a lot of detail about it because they want to hire you and make money. They don't want you to feel negative about your past. And if they're bringing you in, typically you don't want to do anything like that. The other thing I would just say that's important is when you're interviewing with law firms and you always need to portray yourself as strong. So you don't want to come across as weak. You don't want to come across as having had bad baggage. You just remember that you're an attorney. And if you were representing the client, you would do so in a certain way. And as an attorney, you need to represent yourself in a certain way as well. So that's you're your own client, you're attorney. So you need to come across very strong. Okay, how open are law firms to non-traditional career passage as attorneys who have taken entrepreneurial ventures or transitioned from a different industry? Can these experiences be assets, or are they generally perceived as detours? Yes, entrepreneurship, unfortunately, is not valued by law firms, and with good reason. Entrepreneurs are just a different breed of person. They are interested in ways to make money, how to start businesses, how to do things that are exciting, and they'll see new businesses and new opportunities. And it's just a way of thinking. Lawyers, unfortunately, compared to entrepreneurs, I'm not saying this is a bad thing, are things like stability is valued. Being part of the team is valued. Doing things the way the law firm has always done things are valued. And so entrepreneurs get into law firms, myself included, and don't do well. They may have the skills to be a good attorney, but they're just not going to do well. This is just not how lawyers are. Now, some lawyers are very entrepreneurial and they will start law firms, and that's a form of entrepreneurship, and they'll run law firms. And so you can certainly be a good attorney with these types of skills, but at the same time, you just need to realize that law firms definitely are not fired up necessarily about attorneys that have taken non-traditional career paths. And in terms of being an entrepreneur, the final thing is that lawyers are not entrepreneurs. It's just different. You can't. It's just too difficult, and you probably wouldn't be happy in a firm either. Now, transitioning from different industries, okay, people become lawyers after being bankers or different types of things, so there's nothing wrong with that. But in general, you need to be careful. I actually sent out an article to law firms last week about people that they should avoid hiring. And it was entrepreneurs was one of them, because entrepreneurs are typically not happy. Let me just see here. Okay, so next question. Okay, this is from a foreign lawyer. Okay, I'm a foreign lawyer in Nigeria for 5 years, and I just concluded my master's degree in sports law. My practicing in Nigeria has been in IP entertainment. We've taken the New York bar exam last February, applied to a series of firms. It's been difficult to secure an interview for an associate position. Okay, yeah, so this is very common. These questions, and it's foreign lawyers ask this every week, and these are good questions. But the problem with moving to a foreign country is that, first of all, IP and entertainment is an extremely hard practice area for anybody, even a US lawyer, to get into, because there's just not a ton of work in it. It's just not really a big. So what happens a lot of times with foreign lawyers is that it's very difficult to get a position in the US. You have to, typically, I think you have to get an LLM first, but even an LLM, there's LLM programs at Harvard and all these different places for foreign lawyers, and most of them don't get positions in the United States. So you really need to get an LLM, then you can take the bar, but really the smartest thing to do is then you get a JD. Once you get a JD, the JD makes you more marketable. And the reason is because what you're doing is you're competing against US attorneys, people competing against US attorneys, and then for grades and all that sort of thing, transfer grades, et cetera. I'm just writing this down. And then the law firm can compare you to them. The problem with an LLM is pretty much anybody can get an LLM, not anybody, but if you have the money, you can do that. And then not only that, but grades tend to be very good in US LLM programs. So getting a JD after the LLM is very important. The problem, I just want you to understand, the problem is what is the incentive for a US law firm to hire someone that needs to get, and I'm not trying to rain on your parade, but needs to get work visa that is used to law in a different type of country, that may not stick around because they're from another country. They may have to go home if family members have problems. So it's just very difficult for law firms to do that. They will, but you're going to have to be willing to work for less money. You're going to have to be willing to start out at smaller firms. You're probably going to have a hard time doing IP and entertainment. So you just need to be very careful. But this is the route. You get an LLM, you get into US JD program, then you start applying to jobs, and you can often do very well after doing that. But it's very difficult to get positions just coming from a foreign country, because you have to think, how would a US attorney be able to get a position in a law firm in Nigeria? It just would be very difficult. It's the same thing in the US. And so there's no prejudice against people from foreign countries. It's just, but you have to concede, why would a law firm be willing to hire you as opposed to a US attorney? And that's especially true in entertainment. I apologize if that sounds a little harsh, but I'm just I want to be honest with you about how difficult it is. So that looks like all the questions. I certainly appreciate everyone being on this call. I will be next week, hopefully, doing a call for doing resume review. I'm not sure if it'll be next week or the next one. I don't know what's been planned, but the resume review is always a lot of help and a great time to get your resume reviewed. So I'll be doing that. I think one of the things I would just say to conclude this is listening to the stuff, everything you heard today. If you are absorbing it and understanding it, it will make you a great attorney. I do very well in law firms. I have so many people that write me. It's not every week, but it's every few weeks that have been successful following a lot of the stuff. And it's not that I'm some brilliant guy. I just happen to have been in this industry and committed to it for a long time. And the lessons is when you commit to stuff, you learn stuff, and that includes your practice area and law firms, and it just makes you become better and better. I congratulate everyone for taking the time to be on this today. I know this is a very long webinar, but I think it will definitely help you. And I appreciate everyone's time. And I will be back next week, and hopefully we'll do resume reviews. Thank you.